been living in the area for about 40 years. Have been in city planning for 30 plus years. I'm a graduate of NAU. Scott mentioned I worked for the city for many years. I was in the director's job up until 2013. And since that time, I've worked for the city of Glendale and for the U.S. Navy out on Guam, doing military planning as well. My daughter is a graduate of Mingus High School, and she still lives here too.
Excellent.
She's got a salon down on Cove Parkway.
Well, welcome. Your experience is valued.
Looking forward to working with you
We're very glad
folks.
to have you. All right.
Madam Chair, I do want to say one more thing. Your microphones are operating a little bit differently now. It's, you push it on, or you push it once, it'll come on, you push it again, it'll go off, so just be careful with that. You also don't have to get right up into it to speak. Our IT department let us know that it's sensitive enough that just talk normal distance from it, and everything should be okay.
I just have to retrain myself.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Oh, you just turned yours off. There you go.
Could you tell us really quickly, shortly, what was the problem? What was the hang-up with the apartment complex?
We actually cannot discuss it because it's not agendized.
But it's a report.
Right, but it's not something that we can actually discuss. We can talk offline about it.
We could add it as a future item at the end. All right. Was that all of the informational reports?
Yes.
All right. We have the mayor with us this evening. I believe now is the time when we would like you to have, we would like you to come forward and speak. Thank you for coming, by the way. We always appreciate seeing you.
It is my pleasure. I actually take satisfaction in seeing everyone else struggle with their microphones. It's the worst, right?
Yeah.
We'll get it fixed. We'll get it fixed. Hey, I'm not really going to say anything at all other than to introduce Christina Estes-Werther. So we're lucky to have her. She's kind of part of the transition team as we transition from having Steve Horton as our attorney to hiring the new attorney. Don't know who that's going to be yet. However, she's with Pierce Coleman. She's awesome, I'll tell you that, because she worked for the league. She was league counsel for a number of years, 6 years. In fact, she was with them up until about 2 years ago. So League Arizona Cities and Towns. So she's the one that had to see all the crazy things that the legislature was doing, right? And what a terrible time to have left the league, because there's some even crazier stuff coming down the pike these days. But anyway, she was counsel for them. Now she's with Pierce Coleman. She's going to be representing us. I think she's the one that's going to be at our council meetings until we transition to our new attorney. But I'll just say we are in a transition period right now. We're looking for a new manager as well as a new attorney. So things are a little bit in flux, but they won't be this way forever. We still have our strategic plan that we just completed as council. So as soon as that's complete and beautiful, we're going to send it to all of you so you can kind of understand where council's coming from with our direction for the next couple of years here. And again, if there's any questions at all, have an open door policy, as long as it's not violating the open meeting law, which she's going to go over. But I've thought of creative ways over the years to keep council and our commission in better communication. I think that's going to be really, really important as we move forward these coming months. We have a lot of big projects coming up, and I think it's important that we're as lockstep as possible with all the growth and development that we have coming our way. So I'm all ears. If you all have any great ideas, I'm all ears. I've had some real cornball ideas in the years past that haven't worked out so well. So again, just reach out to me at any time to discuss that. Welcome, Mr. Gaylor, our new commission member. Glad to have you here. And I'm going to stick around. I do have to leave promptly at 5:45. We have another meeting starting at 6. So I'm just going to beeline out the door. But Christina Werther, thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm really short, so, okay. You guys can hear me though, right? Okay.
Yes.
Just tell me if you can't. So yes, as the mayor mentioned, so I'm with Pierce Coleman for about 2 years now. I have a lot of state government experience, legislature for 3 years, governor's office for 4, Secretary of State. I was the state election director from 2013 to 2014, and then I had the privilege of working at the League, which I loved, working with all the different cities and towns as general counsel there. So, and then I've been with Pierce Coleman doing more direct representation of cities and towns, which is also really fun. So today I'm really here, I'm trying to keep it kind of light. So we'll kind of go through some of these slides, but certainly if you have questions, let me know. I didn't want to do like a deep dive into sort of all of the statutes and all of the code and, what your responsibilities are. So there are some slides on that information, but it's really just to kind of touch on, sort of what your roles and responsibilities are. Obviously, when you have matters come before you, the staff are providing you with reports and kind of what it is you're supposed to be doing. So I kind of left that a little bit more off, and then we're really going to be focused more on sort of actually your role as a commissioner and sort of the kind of do's and don'ts when it comes to decorum, parliamentary procedure, and some of that touches on open meeting law and conflict of interest. So we'll just dive in. And like I said, just let me know if you have any questions. I kind of talked about this, what we're going to talk about today. So state law and city code, again, these are just sort of the statutes highlighting, anytime that the legislature has said, that the governing body can sort of delegate to a municipal planning commission of some sort, that's usually planning and zoning. And so you'll kind of see here, it talks for municipal planning, also obviously the planning of the commission itself, any type of general provisions about zoning, anything about subdivision regulations, anything like that. The statute basically provides an avenue for the city or town to decide if they want to create a planning and zoning commission. Because again, not all do. Some have just zoning administrators, kind of depends on their size. But for you, obviously, you are here and you have a very important role. So that's just kind of the state statute. And then we have some city code here, and it talks about sort of your composition, right? Your actual membership, that there's 7 of you, that there's a quorum is 4. It talks about sort of your terms, that they're staggered. This is kind of all sort of the regular things you see in formations of different public bodies. And so it also kind of talks about reasons for removal, and then also anything about like expenses. Obviously, you're not paid. And so this is kind of just your general statute or your code to go to when you're talking about formation of the actual commission. Powers and duties, again, this is kind of more general from the city code, just kind of tells about, different types of topics that are coming before you and sort of what it is your responsibility as they're being addressed. So again, mostly zoning. Obviously, you do have a role in like general plan, certain things about special permit appeals. So there's just various things that come before you. But again, this is where I didn't want to get too much into it just because, again, as certain matters come, actually before you, you'll get an actual staff report and they'll tell you what your role is, right? Are you approving, denying? Are you just recommending, are you holding a public hearing, et cetera? So again, this is obviously a chair, there's a vice chair. Again, the four of you constitutes a quorum. I did want to point this out, though, because I've had questions before. If your code or your bylaws don't say anything about quorum, you usually default to what the state statute is in Title I, which is basically a majority is the quorum. And here, technically, yes, 7, 4 is, the majority. But when it's usually written like this, you just have to keep that in mind for vacancies, because right now this is saying that 4 is always a quorum. So that's why it's very important to always kind of try to fill those vacancies quickly, because you always need that 4. And then rules and regulations, obviously for your meetings. I think you have a handbook that's provided to you for boards and commissions, things like that. So kind of tells you, again, sort of those parliamentary procedures, just how to kind of actually move through the meeting to get to accomplish your goals. So again, for state law here, we just have, again, some highlights about the general plan. Every 10 years, cities and towns have to go through the general plan process, and this is sort of what your role is in the process. I think I'd looked on the website. I think it's coming up in 2024. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So
Yes.
You're going to have some fun here soon. That's great. All right. And then obviously zoning, that's a big component of what you do. And so obviously the public hearings are very important, making sure that the public's heard, obviously that you're, giving that chance for people if there's a protest, anything like that, so that you're part of that process, you're making those recommendations to the city council. And then other duties, conditional use permits, temporary permits, there's a lot of different things where sometimes other matters are coming to you And again, the staff would help you to kind of address it. Again, special permits, but I really wanted to get to the best practices because I feel like this is probably what's most useful, especially as you have some newer members. And then even those who are very experienced, I think as you kind of try to find your rhythm and you're kind of melding, it's really important to kind of have an idea of sort of what are the do's and don'ts when you're working together as part of a public body. So best practices for decorum, obviously all speakers have to be recognized by the chairwoman. That's really, a main point because we want to make sure everyone is heard. And so we don't want people talking over each other, whether that's, members of the public or commission members themselves. So everything always has to go through the chair. And then obviously debate, we want to make sure debate's always goes to the agenda item itself. That's really an open meeting law issue. And having done a lot of assistance and also directly having to defend cities and towns with open meeting law violations, you'll get complaints over even the most minor of things. And so it's really important to always stick to the agenda items and make sure that any debate or discussion is only about items on the agenda. And then debate must avoid personalities. That's really just kind of a general, right, kind of life rule. We just want to make sure we're sticking to the actual topics. We're not trying to one-up each other, kind of let our egos get in the way. Like, we're really here to serve the public. We're just trying to make sure that we're fulfilling our duties and our obligations as these matters are coming before you. So we have these things called Riggins rules, and they're actually from a planning commissioner member in the city of Phoenix, and he kind of developed these sort of do's and don'ts. And so we're just kind of go through them a little bit, and some of them do touch on some open meeting law. So first of all, he said, don't miss meetings, right? Of course you're going to miss, you're going to have some times where you're going to be absent or something like that's happening, but it's really more of that, if you're consistently not showing up or you're kind of here or there, again, you have a responsibility here that people are counting on you to review all the material, which is a lot, to be able to be prepared and to, again, move those topics forward, make those recommendations. The city council is counting on you. And so if you're not present, then essentially, not only are they missing out on sort of your voice, but essentially it can kind of hamper the commission's flow, right? Again, especially if you have a vacancy and you have quorum issues. So just you want to make sure that if you have trouble with the time commitments, that you're being really kind of honest and clear about what the expectations are, that you can meet those. And also, there is vacancy statute in state law. So if you consecutively don't discharge your duties for a certain amount of time, your seat is actually just deemed vacant. So again, the state law, the policy takes that seriously as well. Obviously, you want to create a good public impression, right, for the city. You all live here. It's important to you, and so you want to make sure you're kind of putting your best foot forward. Part of that, obviously, is also being on time, making sure that you're prepared. So this fourth bullet is one that people always are kind of puzzled when I have it on here, but it's, again, kind of connected to open meeting law. So it says don't mingle with the audience, so with the public, and have side conversations with other members right before a meeting. So this goes to the open meeting law, right? So you can't have a quorum of members gathering and having a discussion on something that's going to come before you that's not in the public. That's an open meeting law violation, right? So I always think of quorum, gathering, and legal action. Those are sort of the three components. And so you want to avoid that if it's in private because that's a violation. But what people don't realize is sometimes as you're preparing for the meeting to start, people will come up and talk to you and chat with you, and maybe there's four of you, and you're about to talk about the topic that's on the agenda that night. And so you just need to make sure that you're careful, that you're not actually having sort of a pre-discussion before the actual meeting starts. So and it's just one of those kind of traps that's easy to fall into because you feel like you're here, you're set up, you're ready to go, people are here. So just kind of be aware of that.
So if it's under 3, that doesn't constitute quorum?
Correct, yes. But you don't want to do serial communication, right? That's that other component. They want to make sure that you're not having just 3, which is less than a quorum, and then somebody is then sharing that information with a 4th, which then becomes a quorum. So that's the other thing to just be wary of. So, avoid privately discussing a case. So this is really about trying to be objective and neutral. I don't think you want to provide sort of maybe that you're going to favor one side or another, right? Again, because you're trying to get all the information here in the public meeting. You're trying to hear all of the public comment before you sort of make a decision, and so you don't want to come out as though you're already maybe leaning towards one thing or another and talking to people outside of the meeting itself. Not necessarily open meeting law violation, more of a kind of best practice. Yes.
Sometimes we've received emails from the public
Mm-hmm.
to come meet them at their homes to view
Oh.
certain things.
Oh, okay, okay.
What do we do in that case? I have not followed up on that.
Actually, that's a good question. I mean, staff-wise, do you have any, like, do you have those forwarded to you, or is that?
We do ask that they are forwarded to us, but we leave it up to the individual commissioner if they want to have that meeting.
Okay, sure. And I think gathering information is always okay. It's more about trying to disclose that you've already sort of made a decision. So again, do your homework. That's that being prepared, right? Just making sure, staff puts in a lot of time, obviously, to get all the materials prepared. Obviously, the notices have to go out, sometimes, a lot in advance in order to make sure the public's here. We just want to make sure everyone is prepared when you're actually holding your hearing. Again, this kind of goes to the next one. Don't signal how you vote, that kind of same thing. You just don't want to give a heads up that you've already made up your mind without even hearing from the public. And then disqualify yourself for conflicts. So the way that the conflict of interest rule is, if you have anything like monetary or proprietary that's coming before you, that's a substantial interest, then you would have to recuse yourself from participating. And that's the key word, because a lot of people are like, oh, I just don't have to vote. We really shouldn't be participating in the discussion at all. So again, monetary, that's pretty clear, right? If there's some type of financial interest involved. Obviously, if there's a zoning matter that's coming before you that you're going to be affected, then that's maybe something where you're going to want to pause and then see if whether or not there's exceptions, because sometimes there are. Certain classes, if you kind of fall within like 25 or more, then maybe you technically are exempt from the conflict. But there's a whole long list of what they call remote interests in the state law. And so you would want to probably get some assistance to kind of review that if you think that it's triggered, right? So the two things you need to know is there a monetary interest that you might have a conflict with, and is there a property interest? And so if those two things, one of those is triggered, then that's when you might want to have some further analysis. And again, if there is a conflict, it's okay. I think people get really worried that, oh my gosh, I have a conflict. It's all right. We all have conflicts at times, right? Depending on where we live, who's involved. It's just a matter of disclosing it, and then again, recusing yourself from participation in that matter. And then you're good. So be polite and impartial. I think that kind of goes, right, with being said. Everybody just wants to make sure that everyone's civil towards each other and has a good discourse. Being attentive, not only to, I think, each other, but also to presenters and also to the public. You don't want to interrupt a presentation, maybe, or especially maybe a member, obviously, of the public. They're just commenting to you, but you don't want to necessarily sort of interrupt somebody's flow if they haven't asked. Like, for instance, today, I'm like, hey, ask all the questions you want. But sometimes you have someone like a developer or something that's coming to present something, and they just kind of want to get through their presentation, and then they'll have questions. One speaker at a time, kind of already touched on that, right? Everything goes through the chair. And then speakers should address the commission. You don't have a ton of control over this, but it's always a best practice that we try to at least let you know that you should be aware of, that really they shouldn't be addressing like specific commissioners. You as the public body is who they should be addressing. Also, again, respecting the chair, being recognized, to speak. I don't know how it kind of works here with the flow. I think sometimes with a smaller group like this, it's easier, obviously, to kind of see if someone is raising a hand or they have a question and want to be recognized. But you can also just say, Madam Chair, I have something, and that's fine, then she can recognize you. Don't be critical of staff. So, as a former staff person, I just want to make sure that you recognize that they obviously, again, put a lot of work in. It's not to say that maybe you don't have suggestions or there's not something you want to discuss with them. This is more about in public, right? I have had the situation working at the legislature where I've had lobbyists who basically called out my work, not really because it was wrong, but more because it didn't suit their, what they were advocating for. And you just don't want to be in that position of calling out a staff person, in public like that. Have those discussions in private if there's something to address. Again, don't indulge in personalities. Again, we're here to be objective, neutral about the matter before you, and to move it forward or to make your recommendation. And then, again, you don't want to use your questions, comments to make anyone look like they're being foolish or, that they don't know what they're talking about. All of that can be handled, privately. So again, arguments, I'm sure you get some heated issues here from time to time. So you don't want to get too involved in a back and forth, even with each other. Make sure that, again, public can always see, what it is that's being presented, so that they have a view. You don't want to allow speaking from the audience. So this is, again, can be difficult during really like a hot topic, right? Sometimes they really want to be vocal, and it's just reminding them that, again, we want to hear who it is that's being recognized to speak. We want everyone to be heard, or a chance to be heard. And so it's important that there's not distractions and disruptions. Keeping speakers at the podium, again, this happens a lot, and I think it's inadvertent, but sometimes you have like other staff, you have a main staff person or someone who's presenting here at the podium, and then others are kind of background helping them, answering a question maybe via them, but if it's not being recorded, then the public might not be able to hear, you might not be able to hear fully. So it's just important that if someone does that, you just invite them, right, to come up and speak either after or substitute. Again, don't get involved in neighborhood quarrels, which planning and zoning, everything comes to you, might be a neighborhood quarrel. So do your best, right? Have a thick skin, don't hold grudges, right? Again, just you're fulfilling your duties, and then you can move on. And again, be objective. Don't try to fix things, and that's sometimes hard, right? I know for me as a lawyer, I'm like, ooh, a problem solver. I'll just fix this, right? Okay, well, maybe that's not what my role is here, right? As commission members, again, sometimes your role is just recommendations. It's not even approving, denying. It's not, trying to give suggestions. So just look at what's presented to you and take that action that's required. Give a reason for your decision. So sometimes this is required. Facts, findings of fact are very useful. For, again, if you're making a recommendation to the city council, it would be helpful if they knew how you reached your conclusion. And again, sort of another example that I like to give is there are times when, you've seen like a public body get together on something and maybe there's been like no discussion and they all take a vote and you're just like, but I just want to know why, like what was the reason, right? And so it's important if they can put that on the record, but especially you as a body, again, that's making a recommendation to them, that's your time, right? These are the reasons why we're actually in favor, or, denying of this. So it's just important to make sure you have that included. And then again, take staff recommendations seriously. Also for staff, so you want to make sure that you ask for help, right? So it's not as though, you were appointed and you're expected to know everything. There is a lot of information not only provided to you in terms of open meeting law and conflicts and your, handbook, and then all those statutes and the code and the zoning code. There's a lot there. It is okay to ask questions. So just make sure that you do that and you don't feel that you can't do that or you're expected to know everything, because you're not, so. Also, don't answer technical questions. Again, this would be like hard for me as an attorney, right? Not to want to weigh in legally on certain things if I was sitting on a board, but that's not what my role is, right? So you want the expertise that you have and the experience that you bring, and that's very useful, but you don't want to sort of supplant maybe the technical experts that are actually here providing you with that information. Like there's sort of a role for both of you to be, to hear from them, and then you can use your experience, but you don't want to necessarily sort of push them aside and be like, I know more, or I know better, right? Maybe you do, just keep that to yourself, but you just want to make sure that you're respecting any sort of expert, developer, member of the public, anything like that that's coming before you. Again, grant or deny the requests, right? This is kind of back to that, don't try to fix the problem. You are being presented with something, and then it's your responsibility to act. You don't necessarily have to try to fix it for them. And then also, don't react to the outcome of a case. That can be somewhat difficult sometimes. But again, that goes back to that objective, neutral. You just want to make sure that you are appearing, fair, and you're not sort of invested in one side or another. And that kind of goes with sort of discouraging post-mortem remarks, right? You don't want to have sighs or, maybe side comments right afterwards. Just professionalism generally. And then again, this kind of goes back to asking staff questions. If you feel like you don't have enough information to make a decision, then, talk about, can we delay this hearing and what does that look like? Now, you don't want to continuously delay. Obviously, the city council needs that recommendation or, you need to act on certain matters. But certainly if something is really complicated or complex or there's a lot of, history behind it, and you need to know more, it's okay to ask those questions to see if maybe you can get some additional time before that comes before you to make a decision. And then the goal of the chair is to run the meeting well, no pressure. Vice chair as
Never.
well. But I think I think it's once you guys all have, like I said, kind of like a rhythm, you know each other really well, it actually gets pretty easy to kind of move things through. Or people start catching themselves, which is actually nice if they start talking over somebody. Other considerations, so again, deal with jurisdictional issues sort of up front. This is like notices, right? There are certain notices that are required by state law. If you don't follow that process, essentially your work is void. So if you have concerns or if a member of the public brings something up, that's again where you need to work with staff to make sure that all the processes have been done correctly before you start to dig in, and then now your work maybe is going to be undone or have to be repeated. And then this kind of goes to your delays, right? Don't try to keep counsel from hearing a case. Again, if you really truly need a delay because you need more information, something is incomplete, that's fine. You need to work with staff about how the best way to proceed. But you certainly don't want to sort of shirk your duties and decide that, well, we're just never going to get this to council. That would, again, there's also other state statutes that talk about sort of malfeasance and misfeasance and things like that. So we certainly don't want to go there. Ask questions if you're in doubt. And then know and follow, obviously, Arizona laws that pertain to commissioners. We've already kind of talked a little bit about open meeting law, but obviously your meetings have to be properly noticed. Everything that's talked about has to be on the agenda. And then obviously private meetings of commission members, and this goes for emails. So that's always sort of usually the hang up, as people forget, they reply all. And they're getting some background information from staff, which is perfectly fine. But then if you reply all and start saying, well, I don't want to vote on this, or I need this or that, and you're now having a discussion about that matter with a quorum online, essentially, you violated the open meeting law. So you just need to be careful about emails and how you respond. And then the conflicts of interest, we kind of talked about that. Again, just those two triggers, right? Is it monetary interest that I have in here, or is there a property interest? And if yes, then we need to determine if it's a substantial interest. And from there, you might need some assistance with that. So we can always talk about that. And then public records. So we always say this, don't put anything in writing that you might be embarrassed about to read on the front paper, right? Or I guess your app now. But public records, it's essentially any type of record that's within the scope of duty of the public body. So that could be emails and text messages and things like that. So just make sure that you have really clear boundaries about, what you send, and that you're clear and you're not essentially sort of violating things behind the scenes, that a public records request would essentially show that, maybe you've already made your decisions, or maybe you've been having a quorum talking online or anything like that. So you just want to be careful that, again, anything related to this is within your scope of duties, and so it's a public record. Okay, that was a lot. I just kind of dumped a lot on you, but if you have questions, happy to answer them. But I also know this is somewhat of a refresher. So.
Question? Sorry. This is wonderful information, good stuff. I'm glad that you brought it to our attention. Has something changed recently that we're doing this, or is this just kind of something that you think council thinks that it was a good idea to share with us
Sure.
at this point?
Well, typically we have, when there's sort of newer members that are brought on board, because we do a lot of these with our cities and towns. When we've had sort of some turnover, we tend to sort of go over all the do's and don'ts again, just to bring everybody up to speed. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I think.
I'll chime in on that as well. Madam Chair and Commissioner Nelson, we tried to do it last year. It's something that as staff, I think we're going to try and do at the beginning of every year, just as a refresher, because sometimes we do get new commissioners, and it's nice to have that refresher. I know the mayor likes to come and address the commission, seeing all the new faces as well. So unfortunately, we couldn't quite get it at the January meeting, but moving forward, we're just going to try and do it every January.
Yeah, no, I think it was great. That was a great presentation. Something like this, I was kind of looking forward to when I first started. The pamphlet that we got as starting was very helpful, but this was fantastic.
Great. And I just want to say, Madam Chair, that I do try to meet with each new commission member. I haven't met with you yet, and I'm like 50-50, unfortunately. I try my best, but sometimes it slips through the cracks. So I did meet with you, right? Remember, that was great. I'll try to meet, I'll sit down maybe with you, Commissioner Nelson, and you, Commissioner Gaylor, at the same time, and just to introduce myself to you and make sure that you've got everything you need to succeed here. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to say while you're here?
I'm good. Thank you.
It was
Appreciate
a pleasure to meet you, and I assume none of the rest of the commissioners have questions? All right, thank you very much. That was great. That was a great presentation. Not to insult any previous lawyers, but it was an excellent lawyer presentation. As they go. All right. So we are now on to, let's see, is there anyone here from the public? All right. What? No? This is the 5 o'clock. Yeah, we're still in the 5 o'clock meeting. There's new business. This is what we're not supposed to be doing, y'all. We are too comfortable. Dialing it back. Mr. Director, I see you taking the podium.
Yes, if you want.
Yes, please continue.
on the
Introduce the
agenda.
Verde Plaza
Okay.
Apartments. Go on to new business. GP 23-001.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commission. Scott Ellis, Community Development Director. Tina Hayden's out today, unfortunately, so you have to hear from me. I'm going to combine these next 3 items into one presentation. They are 3 separate items that will require 3 separate motions.
Okay.
So it is for the Verde Plaza Apartments, located on the corner of 7th and Aspen Streets. There's an existing apartment complex there now, consists of 5 buildings, community building. There's a property just to the north of the existing that the current new owner or future new owner, I don't think they quite own it yet, has acquired, and they're looking to build some new units there as well and rehab the existing units. So it does require a general plan amendment to, from medium density residential to high density residential, as well as the zone change. So that is a site there. There is apartments to the north, and then there's a vacant piece of property in between where the existing and new units will go and those apartments to the north. That is a city-owned property. That's why its land use is PSP, because it is city-owned. So again, it is general plan amendment from medium density to high density residential, and a zone change from R2 to R3, both of which are multifamily. The R3 does allow higher density. For the existing building, they're looking to do some roof replacements, exterior renovations. They want to expand the community room, upgrade the playground and courtyards, upgrade the parking lot, and do some additional landscaping. So right now, those 5 existing buildings that I mentioned, there's 24 one-bedroom units, 24 two-bedroom units, 4 three-bedroom units. And then the 2 new buildings will have 6 two-bedroom units, 8 three-bedroom, and 4 four-bedroom units. That is the overall site plan. Those boxes right there that are highlighted, they are the 5 existing buildings. Those are the community areas, courtyard, those sorts of upgrades that they're going to do as well. And then those right there are the 2 new buildings just to the north of the existing. The parcels will be combined into one. They're not going to provide additional parking with those new buildings to the north. They have requested, and we did administratively approve, a parking reduction waiver. Given the nature of the housing, it's not warranted to have the maximum amount that's required. They'll have a detention area to the east of the property there. There's a walkway to the north. You can kind of see up there that line that kind of goes across the north of the property and then down. We're going to ask for that to be just straight through, so it doesn't come down through and then over. It'll go straight through to the alleyway behind there. It's got some pathways on it as well. Landscaping is going to be upgraded, as I mentioned. Some of those highlighted points there are just kind of showing where they're going to put additional plants, additional trees. That bottom corner and the yellow, because it is in the site visibility triangle, you're going to see some low shrubs, no higher than 24 inches. Landscape islands in the parking lots to meet current code. So a lot of this was built enough years ago that doesn't quite meet what would be standards today, but they're going to upgrade and meet those standards through this. These are the elevations of the existing buildings and what they would look like after the renovation. Again, there's 5 of those buildings. The new buildings and the existing buildings are essentially going to look the same. They're not going to put really anything different on the new buildings that they're not going to do on these existing. So it's all going to mesh together and look like one complex. We use fiberglass shingles, vinyl windows, and stucco wall finish, some cultured stone, and some stucco on the wall again. Stairways be painted steel, sidewalks throughout as required and needing to be upgraded. Right now, they are trying to rehab some of the stairs. Some of them have fallen into disrepair, so they're trying to work on that as well as do these upgrades to the existing building. So Chapter 4 of the General Plan Land Use recommendation for the Public Facilities Center, it does support sub-area planning or development of master plan for this general area to coordinate public facility development, provide an improved plan for pedestrian and bicycle routes, and to develop a coordinated system of signage. So it is located near public transit. Again, there are some pathways and some trails that run on the south side through the alleyway there and between other developments. I'm sorry, not the south side, the east side. Does encourage mixed-use development, compact centers with residential, retail, office. So there is a variety of that within the general area. You go a little bit further to the north on Main Street, you got some apartments over there, but you also have some offices as well. It does create that infill development that is seen in some areas, and redevelopment. It's kind of taking on both of those at the same time. We do have some stipulations for this if you choose to approve the design review and recommend approval of the general plan amendment and the rezone to council. The first being the project shall be developed in conformance with the development plans as submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission at the February 27th, 2023 meeting. Project shall conform to code review board comments dated July 21st, 2022, and any additional code review board comments. The applicant shall coordinate with staff on the location and design of the walking path. Again, that's the one I mentioned to the north. And shall dedicate public trail easement along the northern lot line prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy. All exterior lighting shall meet the provisions of the city's zoning ordinance, section 408. Landscaping shall be installed in accordance with zoning ordinance, section 407, prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy. Separate permits are required for any signs. All addressing and street names shall be coordinated and approved by the Cottonwood Fire and Medical Department, shall meet all requirements of the 2018 International Fire Code. Building permit application must be submitted within 24 months of design review approval. If this requirement is not met, the design review approval shall be revoked and a new code review and design review submittal will be required. Design review approval for the additional 18 residential units shall not be effective until the proposed zone change to R3 takes effect, if council does decide to approve that. These are some pictures existing now looking east on Aspen Street. From this view, the apartments are just, if you're standing there, they would be on your left-hand side. That's looking west on Aspen towards 6th. Looking north on 7th. And then those are some of the properties to the south, which are business properties, get some offices in there and various other businesses. To the west, directly across 7th Street, is city buildings, police, fire, and communications center. Properties to the north, again, part of that vacant property there is going to be for this development. The other part further north adjoining that next development is city-owned property. Those properties to the east. Looking south from the adjacent vacant parcel. That's what the parking lot looks like. Looking towards the southeast. Those are the courtyards to the northeast, and as you can see in the pictures, as I mentioned, they're kind of already doing some much-needed rehab, separate than what they're bringing to you tonight. This courtyard looking south, detention basin looking east, and the courtyard looking east. That is all I have for my presentation. There is a representative here to answer any questions as well.
Thank you very much. Does anyone on the commission have any questions for city staff? We'll go in order. Commissioner Nelson?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Nice presentation. I'm sorry, I missed the reason why there was no additional parking lots required?
So, given the amount of people that are living here, they did submit a parking study to us based on current occupancy. Those numbers didn't show that additional expanded parking was needed. This parking lot already is not full with the existing buildings and residents that are there. So based on that, based on their reasoning and the ability to accommodate what they would need even with the additional buildings, we didn't see that requirement had to be met. So we do have the provision to allow administrative waiver of that, and so we went ahead and approved that. They will rehab the parking lot, though, to bring it up to standards, make sure it's striped. Again, landscaping's in place, lighting's in place.
Are there going to be any accessible units on the new structures that would require an ADA component to path of travel?
That I am unsure of. We could ask the architect who's here.
Okay. And then finally, renovations to the existing buildings, was that based on any code issues, or it was just a voluntary upgrade based on deterioration of the structures?
What they're bringing to you, the commission tonight, is voluntary. They're wanting to rehab it, upgrade it, and make it look like the new buildings that they want to do.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Gaylord, I didn't.
Thank you.
Say?
I just got a couple of things. Actually, probably most of my questions have to do with the architecture and the design component. I think this is a great project, and it's a good place, for added density in the community. Good spot for that, and I'm happy to see, some renovation of an older multifamily. This goes back to the 80s, I think, something like that. Yeah, great project, honestly. I'm a little curious about why we have to rezone the whole parcel to R3. And the reason I bring that up is because all that's really being added are the two buildings to the north on that 1 acre of property. I don't know if that's being added, if that was acquired, or if that was originally part of the property. You're adding 18 units on 1 acre. If you were to just rezone that to R3, wouldn't that satisfy?
It's a density. It's because of the density. Having them add that number of units, combining those parcels, going to R3 allows them to be within the approved density within the land use plan of the general plan. So if they kept as R2, it wouldn't quite reach that, so this accommodates that.
But I mean, can't you accomplish that just by rezoning the north parcel, R3, and leaving the other one alone?
Well, because of them not adding parking to that, have two separate parcels, they'll have to get into the shared parking agreement. I mean, chances aren't great that it would ever be sold to two different owners, but it is a possibility. So instead of having to work through all of those different agreements because they're on separated parcels, rezoning all of it, making it one, and then having just that one parking lot basically becomes one big
Sure.
development.
The reason I bring it up, I guess, is the only concern I really have is that it's 4.2 acres times at an R3 zoning density, that's 29 units an acre. That's like 121 units that we're entitling with this action. Would that be right?
Yes, that would be right.
And, the zoning, this is where we get to use that lever, to get street improvements and so forth. I just want to make sure that, everybody understands that that's the entitlement and that we're doing what we can to get, the site plan looks great to me. There's a high level of street side improvement. I could say a few things about the sidewalks. That's just kind of my pet peeve. I like to see a little more shade in this town, especially in the summertime, so that, we're doing what we can to help with that. I just wanted to bring that up, make sure that everybody understands that. The rest of my comments have to do with just the details on the site plan.
Commissioner Gaylord, just as a general heads up, there also is a comment portion. So if you ever have additional comments, you'll have a chance to share them after the question period.
Okay.
Too. Do any other commissioners have questions for staff? Do you still have questions? Go ahead, Vice Chair.
So I'm looking at the details or the plans, and the landscaping plan shows that the corner at 7th and Aspen is going to be rebuilt to include the handicap access, but the site plan doesn't show that. So I wanted to know which one was correct. So that one there doesn't show that corner being rebuilt to include handicap access at the corner, but the landscape plan does.
Are you talking about where that,
Where that yellow
Where that
square is.
yellow
down at the
square
bottom
is?
Right, bottom left-hand corner.
versus that corner there?
Right.
Yeah, everything's gonna have to match when they submit for building permits. We will verify that everything is the way it's supposed to be. They meet all codes, including ADA accessibility.
So they will be rebuilding that corner.
I can let the architect answer that.
Okay, and then also, I like that you're adding the sidewalk up Aspen, which is great because there's gonna be a lot of foot traffic through there, and that's the only piece that doesn't have a sidewalk currently in that area. But I'm wondering why we're allowing them to leave the 3-foot section that crosses, runs along 7th, because from the pictures I saw and from driving it, it's in pretty bad shape.
Yeah.
And it's only 3 foot wide. It's, the city has a 5-foot standard, and it obviously, doesn't match that. So I'm wondering why we're not having that rebuilt, because by the time they cut in the driveways and they add the new section on the other end, there really isn't much left that they, couldn't just redo that and bring it all up to standard.
But you're talking about this existing versus the,
Right, when I drove it, it was in pretty bad shape, especially when you got down to the corner. And it just seems like it would be better if we're gonna be putting in a 5-foot along the side, and we're gonna be doing all these new driveway cuts on the driveways for the parking lot, and we're doing all the addition of the landscaping in there. It might be best just to be yanking that out and making it standard, because of all the mix match you're gonna have when you cut all the little pieces out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Plus, if I remember right, there isn't a sidewalk on the new section of land. Only the old section, the built section. Is that correct? So when you get up to where the 2 new buildings are gonna be built, I don't remember a sidewalk being up on that section of land already, currently. So there's no reason that couldn't be brought up.
Right.
I haven't been down there in a while. I can't picture if that's there or not.
Yeah, I drove it again, and I don't remember seeing it, but I wasn't specifically looking for the end of the sidewalk there, as much as I was looking at the property, so. That's the only questions I had.
That
Thank
may
you.
be one to repeat for the architect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that that's all the questions that we have for staff. We would love to have the representative for the applicant come forward. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Good evening. My name's Andrew Cheddar. I'm with Eidos Architects in Greenwood Village, Colorado.
Welcome. I believe that some of my commissioners have some questions for you. Commissioner Nelson, do you have any questions?
Once I know how to push the push button, yes, welcome and thanks for coming. Appreciate it. As my fellow commissioner said, I think it's a good use of that space. I think it's a good location to add on to. My only concern was the accessibility with those two new buildings. If any of those units are going to be accessible by code, and we're not doing any parking lot improvements or any of that, how are we going to address that?
Yes, there are new accessible units in both those units as well as the rest of the buildings. We are regrading and redoing the entire parking lot to make it more ADA accessible for everybody. And we are providing more accessible units than is required by the code.
But if you don't have a path to travel, you can make the units accessible all day long, but if you don't have a path to travel, somebody who's impaired cannot get there.
They will have an accessible path to travel to and from the parking lot and to the units.
Okay, perfect,
Yep.
thank you.
Commissioner Geller, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I got a few things here, yeah.
Can I hold up and say one more thing about that past one?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I just wanted to note that there was a little bit of misinformation, I guess, that Director Ellis misspoke a little bit. We are redoing the inside of all the units that are existing there. And part of that is making them ADA accessible for today's codes. Like we said, this was built in 1982. So there is a rehab of every single unit within them, and we are rehabbing them, the accessible units within them too.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. Just first of all, a question. What's the use of that northeast corner?
It's just open space.
Open space?
Yep.
Was that part of our allotment, or 20%?
It is part of it. I think the total came to around 56% open space on this project, so we are well above it. That's just kind of an open area that we're not, it kind of made it a little awkward to tuck a building all the way back in there. There isn't access with it, with the current building setup there, so we just kind of left it as open space.
Any recreational use of the retention area?
No, it'll be fenced off for safety reasons.
The trail that goes from, what is that? That's that flood project east of you?
Yep.
There's a sidewalk, north-south sidewalk?
There is a south sidewalk on that east side
Yeah.
that it'll connect into.
So is that a public trail?
It will have an easement in it, and it'll be open to the public, yes.
Public. The reason I ask is the apartments to the north have one like that too, but it's gated off, so there's a locked gate on it. I
No,
just wondered.
this one will be open,
This is
and
public?
it'll
Okay.
have an easement with the city. And part of that is that we wanted the direct connection to the great services that you guys have over here with the recreation center, the library, courts, police, fire department.
Have you guys discussed the option or the possibility of detaching the sidewalks along the frontage of this thing? Just to add shade out there on the street?
We have not.
I thought we had years ago when I worked here, we had toyed with the idea of actually committing to detaching the sidewalks on the collector streets and, wherever you had the right-of-way that was available for that. I'm just looking for opportunities for shade trees on the street. I'm not sure where that conversation has gone now that we're all worried about water, even more than we were before.
There are a lot of trees being planted with this project and a lot of shrubs, a lot of landscape going in.
The architecture is similar to what's existing, stucco and shingles?
Yep, we will be adding about a 3 to 4 foot high wainscot around all the buildings, as well as we're adding some gables to some of the roofs just to give it a little bit
Yeah.
more of a definition.
How about patios, porches, patios,
Yep,
balconies?
So all level ones will have their own little small patio with some little wrought iron gate kind of fence just for a little privacy. right
Upper
in front.
level,
Level two will the patios on the top, the walkways are a little wider. There is room for someone that they could put some chairs out there or something, but they're not extended patios or anything like that.
I guess, my question would be for staff, I guess, if there's a requirement for that. I don't recall that myself. A lot of places, they do have a requirement for an outdoor patio, private balcony, et cetera.
Mr. Director, can you clarify that point?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Gellert, no, we don't have those requirements in place.
Thank you.
Okay. Driving by there, just looking at the existing parking lot, it's terribly void of vegetation. I know you're in the process of doing something about that. The view of that interior courtyard, you got all those stairways coming down into the courtyard. Any chance we could put some trees in there, kind of obscure that?
Yep, there are trees in there. Just a little history on the total project of it. The previous owner had there was some issues with fire department responding to calls at this facility, and the stairs were inadequate, so the fire department and the ambulance services said they were no longer going to service the buildings. So basically, the second levels of these got condemned. The current owner went in there and started putting in the new steel walkways and stairs to get up to them. That contractor walked off the job last year, so that's why it's been kind of a long project. We currently have a new contractor out there right now. They've poured the footings for it, and they're starting to put in these new walkways. And we're going to re-landscape all the interior courtyards. We're going to put new trees, shrubs, benches, bike racks. There's some like cobblestone kind of swales to help with drainage when we do get the larger water to get through as well.
And so, like with the new buildings, it's pretty common practice to obscure or internalize the stairways these days in a multifamily project. I just wondered, are they going to be visible from the street? The stairways?
They are, but we are minimizing the amount of stairs by trying to join some of the buildings together to make it so there's less. We're still meeting code and everything like that, but we're trying to get rid of as many stairs so it's not so cumbersome to fill up those courtyards.
Just a couple more questions about the screening issues. In the parking areas, is there any kind of pony wall obscuring the cars from the street?
No, we
Parked
just got
car?
along 7th Avenue, we have all the trees and shrubs. Along South Aspen Street, we are installing it is a fence, it's a 4-foot high fence requested by the police department. It is gonna be partially opaque at times and then partially like a wrought iron fence. Just kind of breaking it up so it's not so monolithic through the entire area.
Are you adding enclosures for the trash?
Yes, we have 3 trash enclosures and a little maintenance shop we're also adding.
How about the lovely chain link fences on the street? Can we do something about that?
Yeah, those are getting on
Okay.
7th Street. Yep, those are getting replaced with it's called a rhino wall. It's kind of like a prefabricated, kind of looks like a stucco wall. It's pre-made and kind of they just put the columns in and it slides in, and we're breaking that up. There's going to be like 20 to 30 foot stretches of that wall, and then 20 to 30 foot stretches of just like wrought iron black fence, just to kind of, we're trying to get rid of as much of the chain link as possible, but we will have chain link around the retention pond and on the east side of the property.
The mechanicals on the old units,
Those are getting demoed and redone so they don't look
we're not going to
what
see
they
that
look like
anymore?
right now. You'll see them, but they're not going to be as prominent as they are right now.
Can they be screened somehow?
The wall will help screen them, yes.
The perimeter wall?
Perimeter wall, yep.
All I got for now.
All right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stevens, did you have any questions for the applicant? All right. Commissioner Glasscott? Commissioner Kling? All right. Vice Chair, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Just back to the sidewalk, you heard the questions. What are your plans to do with that corner? Because the 2 plans conflict.
So the 2 plans conflicted because Tina requested an updated site plan, landscape plan, so the other plan didn't get. We will have that be an ADA. It'll match city requirements for that corner as well.
And then what about the old sidewalk sections going down 7th?
They're not planning on being replaced right now. I did look after that question was brought up, and there is a sidewalk where the new lot to the north is. There is an existing
Okay.
sidewalk there. Our plan right now is to reuse the existing vehicle cuts that are there. So that is why we're just replacing those pans in that area.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. My questions have been well covered. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you very much for representing.
Thank you.
You may sit. All right. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak on this project? Please come forward, sir. Have you filled out a form? All right, there's a form for you to fill out. And just as an FYI, this should be in direct relation to this project.
It is.
All right?
Hi.
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you for holding this zoning meeting. My name's Eric Massoon. I actually live on 8th, right there. And really my concerns would be not having a fence in that open area that's up against the wash, especially if this is a family-oriented development. The water gets pretty, when there is rain and there is a flash flood, it's concerning to have it open and easy access. The retention pond area, I'd also hope that the fence along the wash gets changed out to some sort of wrought iron or something, because there's now graffiti on it. And, you know, because of the type of material it is, it's very easy to graffiti. If it were chain link or wrought iron, you wouldn't really get to see it. Another concern would be electrical supply. I know during the monsoon season we have outages. I don't know if this is the same grid or not, what impact it has to us. Otherwise, it's a wonderful project. And I do have concerns about the owner. I attended the initial hearing, and it was kind of confusing as to who the owner is. If it's the same owner, I'm very skeptical of this project, because you can go back to 2018 and see that this was run down. I've only lived here a year and a half, and it's been run down the whole time. It's just recently that I've seen any change to it. That's it. Thank you for my time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and attending and sharing.
I need to fill out questions.
Yes. Procedure. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak on this project? All right, I close the floor to the public. We're going to go through each commissioner and get their thoughts on the project. We're going to start with our newest commissioner. Please go ahead, George.
Is that me?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier, I think this is a good spot for this kind of a project, and the density does not offend me. There's a few things that I think could be tweaked to make it a better project. You know, we are entitling this piece of property to 121 units, to my calculation, meaning that the owner could take the site plan, throw it out the window, sell the property to somebody else, and they'll come back here with a different one. They would have the entitlement, and they'd have the right to do so, as near as I can tell. Some of the things that I would recommend or like to see are just, you know, a little more creativity along the streetscape in the way of a sidewalk, the detachment of the sidewalk. Randy mentioned the substandard sidewalk along 7th Street. I think that ought to be part of it. Along the east side of the project, there's a good opportunity for maybe a view fence, as the gentleman suggested. A lot of landscaping going on over there, retention areas, open areas, trails. I could see a high level of amenity that could occur in that portion of the site. And, you know, if you can see it from the trail system, so much the better. The architecture itself, these days, is pretty standard to have a substantial balcony, outdoor area, private area for residents. I'm not sure how that affects the cost of the project, but that's something I would like to see in the way of amenity. The screening around the parking areas, the low-level pony walls, you know, there's an opportunity to do, you know, some more monumentation or wainscoting or river rock or what have you, just something to bring a higher level of ornamentation to the streetscape. That's something that I would like to see. The architecture itself, the stuff that's out there is from the 80s. I'm hoping they're not copying that too completely. I'd like to see some improvement there. a little more trim work around the doors, windows, the openings. I think that's about it. You guys permit asphalt shingles on multifamily projects? Okay. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Nelson, your thoughts?
As you echoed earlier, Chair, I think everything that I have a concern has been addressed and then some, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevens? Just press it once, it's new.
No comments, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Glasscock?
I think definitely I like the fact that you're improving it and that you have answered the questions about the parking. That was my main concern.
All right. Commissioner Kling?
Well, I caught the,
Press it once.
oh, okay, thank you. You said that. I caught the tail end of this, but I just appreciate you addressing the safety concerns for the existing residents. I was here in town when some of those were threatened to be displaced, and it was tragic. There was nowhere for them to go. So anything, that you're doing to improve it, and I live right around the corner, so I really appreciate the aesthetics being improved and the safety issues addressed. That street does flood, and I'm all for it.
All right. Vice Chair?
So I appreciate what's happening here. This piece of property and the buildings that are on it have been a blight in that neighborhood for a long time. And to the point you see it now. And it doesn't take much to see, the lack of attention that's been given to those buildings and what it's caused. And this really is a perfect location for high density. We're so close to all the city amenities, this facility, our park, our library. It's going to be a great addition to the neighborhood, and like I said, a great place to have a higher density. So I'm glad that they're not only fixing up the property, but they're putting more investment in it to increase its usability as well. I still would prefer to see some more being done with the sidewalks. As you mentioned, this is going to be a walkable development. It's a walkable area. I think you're going to have a lot more use on those sidewalks and those trails than maybe you think. And not only would it be good for your tenants and your customers, but it'd also be good for the neighborhood and make you a better neighbor as well. So anything you could do to address the concerns that are coming from the houses to the east of you would be great. I'd really love to see that retention basin being used as a park area instead of being fenced off and just kept as a no man's land. You see that done in other communities in Phoenix all the time. I don't know why it would be considered dangerous to utilize that space. It's a massive piece of the land, and if we're going to keep it open, it seems like it should be usable as well. So I'd love to see you relook at that section of land and see if there isn't a way you could make that an amenity instead of another problem that you're going to have to deal with maintenance-wise. But other than that, welcome the community, and can't wait to see this get done and that area get freshened up. So thanks for your attention to it.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I agree with many of my fellow commissioners' thoughts, especially about the sidewalk issue. And to that end, I'd like to ask the applicant to come forward one more time. I have a quick question for you. Do you feel that it would be reasonable for us to add, would it be an undue hardship if this commission added a stipulation to improve the sidewalk, the existing sidewalk?
Just as the architect, I can't make that decision. I'd have to discuss that with the owner and everything, but I think he'd be open to entertaining it at all, or maybe, having some trade-offs for some other ideas or something like that where he could find cost savings other places.
Thank you very much.
Just as a comment to assist some of the other stuff, this is an affordable housing project. So it is getting tied to some tax dollars and some U.S. rural development grants. So in your sense, it would be difficult for them to sell it to another developer just because of the legal obligations that they'll be tied to with those tax credits and those loans that they're receiving from that.
All right. Thank you very much. That was my only question. And a quick question for the director. Is there anything that city staff might say to prevent adding that stipulation, since I know that the sidewalks impact the city heavily?
Madam Chair, I was actually going to make that comment about the funding for this project. It is getting CDBG funds. So it is federally funded as affordable housing. Adding that stipulation, I can't answer for the owner as well, what that would do to the project. It is something that if the city was going to require it, it would have been mentioned at the code review level by our Public Works and Engineering Department that it's something that needed to be done. Those comments are not in what we received from that department from code review. So keep that in mind.
All right, thank you very much. It's important information. I also appreciate the additional information about it being an affordable housing project. That's very pertinent to our decision-making here on this commission. My thoughts on this are in favor of this project after seeing the presentation. I think that it's excellent infill. I generally agree with the increased density in this location. This location is an excellent spot for increased density. It's also adjacent to some other dense locations, so it makes sense from a city planning standpoint. And that's my summary. So with that, I am going to, let's see. I think we're ready to entertain a motion.
So we'll start with the general plan amendment. I move to recommend approval to the city council for GP 23-001 to change the land use designation from MR medium density residential to HR high density residential for approximately 4.2 acres located on the northeast corner of 7th Street, South 7th Street and East Aspen Street, 185 and 195 South 7th Street.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you very much. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Glasscock?
Yes.
Commissioner Klinge?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gaylor?
Yes.
Vice Chair Garrison?
Yes.
Chairwoman Maston?
Yes. All in favor? Motion approved. Next motion.
The next motion will be the approval to recommend approval of a zone change. I move to recommend approval to the city council for Z 23-001 to change from R2 single-family multifamily residential zone to R3 multifamily residential zone for approximately 4.2 acres located on the northeast corner of South 7th Street and East Aspen Street, 185 and 195 South 7th Street.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Glasscock?
Yes.
Commissioner Kling?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gaylor?
I have a question. What are the stipulations? We read through them earlier.
Well, the stipulations be on the next motion.
This is the zoning?
This is the the motion was to recommend approval of zone change. So the next one would
With
be
no
design review.
With no stipulations?
The design review will have the stipulations.
How is that tied to the zoning?
Right, the, Commissioner Gaylor, yeah, the stipulations are part of the design review approval, not the rezone.
Okay.
That's where they'll be read.
Okay. I vote yes.
Vice Chair Garrison?
Aye.
Chairwoman Maston?
Aye. Unanimously carried. For this third motion, are there any stipulations that we want to add? I believe that the sidewalk is unwise.
I would like to have the applicant come back to the city staff and discuss that 7th Street sidewalk as a possible
Just discuss?
modification to the site
Okay.
plan.
I think that that's a reasonable stipulation. Discuss. Is there anything further?
I think they should build a sidewalk on Center Street.
I think having it as a discussion, because this is really something staff has to have input on.
Okay.
Because of the sidewalk. All right.
Madam Chair, sorry, I know there's a motion on the table. Really quick, though, to again address Commissioner Gaylor's question. If you notice that the way the suggestion motion is, those stipulations are still tied to the new buildings, even though it's not part of the rezone motion.
Right.
It does apply to those new buildings and the project as a whole as well.
All right. Vice Chair, care to make a motion?
I move to approve DR 23-001 for the renovations to the existing buildings and the addition of 18 residential units, subject to the following stipulations. Number one, the project shall be developed in conformance with the development plans as submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission at the February 27, 2023 meeting. Number two, the project shall conform to Code Review Board comments dated July 21st, 2022, and any additional Code Review Board comments. Number three, the applicant shall coordinate with staff on the location design of the walking path and shall dedicate public trail easement along the northern lot line prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Number four, all exterior lighting shall meet the provisions of City Zoning Ordinance Section 408. Number five, landscaping shall be installed in accordance with Zoning Ordinance Section 407 prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Number six, separate permits are required for any signs. Number seven, all addressing and street names shall be coordinated and approved by the Cottonwood Fire and Medical Department and shall meet all requirements of the 2018 IFC. Number eight, a building permit application must be submitted within 24 months of design review approval. If this requirement is not met, the design review approval shall be revoked and a new code review and design review submittal will be required. Number nine, design review approval for the additional 18 residential units shall not be effective until the proposed zone change to R3 multifamily residential takes effect. And number 10, the applicant shall come back to city staff for a discussion on the upgrade of the sidewalk along 7th Street.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Glasscock?
Yes.
Commissioner Kling?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gaylord?
No.
Vice Chair Garrison?
Yes.
Chairwoman Maston?
Yes. Passed. Congratulations. All right, and with that, so we have two meetings this evening. We do not have any discussion items on the agenda tonight for the 5 o'clock meeting. I would like to handle suggested topics for future meetings in the next meeting. I make a motion to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next meeting. There we go. I call to order the 6:20 regular meeting of the Cottonwood Planning and Zoning Commission, Monday, February 27th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Stevens? Commissioner Glasscock?
Present.
Commissioner Kling?
Present.
Commissioner Nelson?
Present.
Commissioner Gaylord?
Present.
Vice Chair Garrison?
Present.
Chairwoman Maston?
Present. Our first item is approval of the minutes from our January 23rd meeting, 2023. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? All right. Sorry, I'm checking my notes. Oh, obviously we have to approve the minutes. Does anyone move to approve?
I move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes approved, unanimously carried.
I didn't vote, I'm sorry, I wasn't here.
You abstained?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for clarifying.
Sure.
All right. Informational reports and updates?
Nothing additional.
All right, I didn't think so, but I forgot it. And now we have the call to the public. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda this evening? All right, I am closing the floor to the public. We don't have any old business this evening, so we are moving on to new business, which is the general plan update. Hello, Mr. Davis.
Hello, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Gary Davis with Community Development, and we are at the first introduction to the visioning process for our general plan update. This is the first of many scheduled meetings. This one is highlighted in red on this graphic. We'll be having this overview vision and values meeting again on Saturday. We've double scheduled all these meetings so that if somebody can't make a Thursday night meeting, they can maybe make a Saturday, or if they can't make the Saturday, they can make a Thursday. But they can, these will be the same meeting held twice, just to give as many people a chance to participate as possible. So the first focused meeting will be March 9th and 11th, narrowing down a little bit from the broad issues that can be discussed tonight. This is kind of the general overview. We want to talk about more specific issues that are related to each other. So for the first meeting, we'll be focusing on land use, economic development, and housing. For the second focus meeting, we'll be having a discussion on natural resources and city services. That'll be March 16th and 18th, and on the March 30th and April 1st, we'll be talking about circulation and public safety. A lot of transportation, a lot of public safety issues, traffic safety issues along with that. So hopefully with this overview, plus the slightly more focused groups over the next month or so, we can really get a good idea of what the community is interested in. So at this meeting, I want to go over these topics. First of all, kind of a refresher, what is a general plan? Also, talking a little bit about the proposed update, some changes to the structure that we're proposing. Also looking at the current picture of Cottonwood using the new city atlas, which you all have a copy of now, the first draft. And then open it up for the first discussion on vision and values for the general plan. Again, we'll have this all over again on Saturday in a more informal setting. There won't be microphones or anything like that. It'll be just people sitting around having a discussion about what's important to them and the community. So starting off, state law requirements for a general plan says the general plan shall consist of statement of community goals and development policies. Plan shall include maps, any necessary diagrams, and text setting forth objectives, principles, standards, and plan proposals. So that's it. That's all a general plan has to do. It has to be a list of the goals of the city, goals of the citizens, and text setting forth policies, objectives, principles, and plan proposals. This general plan must be updated every 10 years. The last time was in 2014. It went to the voters and was approved by council. And it's good to remember, too, that a general plan is a policy document. This is not law. This is not legislation. The city codes, city zoning ordinance, that's legislation. That's what is enforced. This is a policy document saying this is a guide for how the community generally wants the city to develop over the next X amount of years. The existing structure right now, the general plan has a lot of stuff in it, it's a pretty thick document, as you probably have noticed. It's got vision with goals and objectives in it, and current condition. It has a lot of description of how things are now, background information, maps, supporting information, things like that. And then it has its recommendations for policies. Again, this document is updated every 10 years. Problem with that is the part of it that is talking about current conditions, supporting information, that gets out of date pretty quickly. Back in 2012, 2013, when it was last done, the housing crisis was, how can I unload my house in a buyer's market? Totally flipped since then, so it's good to keep current. What we're talking about this time is, plus we have a strategic plan the mayor mentioned earlier that has a bunch of action items on it that are priorities for the council. It right now doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with the general plan. It's kind of on its own and not plugged in really with policies of the general plan so much. What we're proposing here is a kind of a leaner general plan, and we're hoping that that makes it more usable, more user-friendly, easy to follow, and this would include the vision and goals and policies long-term, and this again gets updated every 10 years. Now that part about the current conditions, maps supporting information, that would go in this document that you have in front of you called the City Atlas. This talks about current conditions. It has maps. The goal here is if it can be mapped, measured, counted, it's in here. And this kind of supports the process that we're starting now. People have a current standard for what the situation is, where we are with the city, and how we got here. And this one, because it's current information, it can be updated every 1 to 2 years. It doesn't have any policies in it, doesn't have any suggestions in it. It's just here we are and how we got here. So that information with the City Atlas can inform the general plan process. And then the general plan, the policies can be moved forward. Again, if they're simple, easy to follow, they can be moved into the strategic plan, and policies and action items that carry out the policies can be done with the strategic plan. Strategic plan is more of a current work list. This is what we're going to do the next couple of years. These are our priorities. Those priorities can be based on the policies that come out of the general plan. Existing structure of the current plan has a number of elements. Some of these are required by state law. Some of them are ones that we've added on our own. Includes land use, circulation, open space and parks, et cetera, et cetera. Housing is one of them. Water resources is one of them. Sometimes the issue with this type of structure is there are topics that may not fall completely into one category or the other. And we looked at ways of maybe allowing for that, because there are some things that fall into 2 or even more of these categories. So how do you deal with that? What we're looking at and what we're structuring the City Atlas on, and probably the general plan too, is kind of a matrix here. So we've got in the yellow boxes the various elements, but then there's intersections between the two of them. For instance, if on the subject of vehicular traffic, well, yes, that's a circulation element, that's transportation, but it's also a land use element. You don't have traffic if you don't have commercial development. If you're not planning the commercial development in coordination with the vehicular traffic or with the circulation element, you're kind of missing something. So that number 4, circulation and land use, becomes the nexus between those two, and so it becomes part of both the land use element and the circulation element. The City Atlas, there's several places to get it. It's online. We've got a PDF posted at our website in community development. We've got a copy at the public library that people can look at as well, and we'll have a copy available down at our office, 111 North Main at Community Development. So anybody wants to take a look at this again, hopefully this is something that can inform the process and take a lot of that current information, background information out of the general plan so it can focus on what the policies and what the plans are for the future. So are there any questions about the structure, the process here, or the structure of the general plan as we are hoping to move forward with? Otherwise, we'll get right into kind of a highlight of the atlas here and just kind of give you the broader issues that are in the atlas. There's a lot of topics in there, but starting with population. Cottonwood, as you know, is not in isolation. It's surrounded by other communities. It's adjacent to Clarkdale. It's barely adjacent to Camp Verde. And it's also adjacent to the Verde Village CDP. That's a census-designated place. And that includes the Verde Village units on both the west side and the east side of 260, as shown in the blue on this map. It also goes up and includes all the Bridgeport area and all the unincorporated area up the river toward Dead Horse Ranch. It also, for some reason, the Census Bureau included a little corner of Verde Santa Fe, but not all of it. The rest of Verde Santa Fe is outside the Verde Village CDP. Cornville CDP in purple is over farther east. It doesn't include Verde Santa Fe either. But the population for all these areas collected, except for Camp Verde, but Cottonwood, Clarkdale, Verde Village, and Cornville, is right around 31,000 right now. So here's the population trends since 1990. Cottonwood is in the solid orange, and it's been neck and neck with Camp Verde. They're both just a little over 12,000 right now. Right up at the top, you can see that the estimates, census estimates for the Verde Village census designated place are just a little bit higher than Cottonwood. So Verde Village actually has more population than Cottonwood itself. And Cornville, you can see down below Clarkdale is in the 3,000 range. Clarkdale is a little over 4,000, and Jerome is, as usual, about 400 and something people. Some basic statistics, median age of these communities. Cottonwood just went up to 53.3. Obviously that means there's as many people over 53 as there are under 53. That number actually went up 2 years in the time that it took me to do this atlas. It was about 51 not too long ago. That's been upgraded. Yavapai County is higher, and Clarkdale is higher still. Median household income, just a little under 39,000 for Cottonwood, and the other cities are kind of all over the map in terms of that. Only Clarkdale has a lower median household income right now. By the way, at the tops of these bars on these bar charts, you see the little brackets. Those are margin of error. When the Census Bureau produces these estimates, they also give a margin of error plus or minus. So I put the brackets on that as well. Just to kind of show you that with a smaller sample size, there is some room for error. Like in Clarkdale, for example, there's a lot more margin of error on the median household income than on some of the larger communities. And for Arizona and the United States, that margin of error, since it's such a huge sample size, is much smaller. But anyway, that's what those little brackets at the end of the bars mean. So the projected growth for Cottonwood, this is going back to the incorporation in 1960. Started out 1,879 people, went to 12,029 as of the 2020 census. And right now, the latest estimates we've got from the State Office of Economic Development, Economic Opportunity, is 12,296. So that's our official number right now as far as we know. The State Office of Economic Opportunity projects growth in the red numbers you see there. So they're projecting growth at about the pace that we saw from 2010 to 2020, not the pace that we saw in the 1990s. It's much more subdued. Right now, that 12,296, if that's accurate, and again, that's just an estimate statistically, but that adds about 130 people each year. But if you look at the projections over 20 years and over 30 years from 2020, going into 2040, it adds 1,700 people, which is about 85, 86 per year. And going to 2050, it would add from 2020 about 84 people per year. So it's not a particularly ambitious projection. The city, in the process of this general plan, can adopt a projection. It doesn't have to, but for planning ahead for capacity purposes, the city might want to adopt a projection for either 2040 or 2050. The general plan last time around was called General Plan 2025, which put it 11 years in the future back then. And that's one of the open questions right now is, does the city want to call this plan General Plan 2035, or does it want to call it 2040, 2050? How much of a window does it want to take on? So anyway, back to the population projections here. So how many housing units would we need for that? Well, persons per dwelling unit right now is about 12,296 divided by about 6,100 dwelling units means there's about 2 people per dwelling unit. So we would need a dwelling unit per year count of adding about 43, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it's not quite that simple demographically, because population growth equals net migration, people moving in, people moving out, and natural change, which is birth minus death. Well, remember our very high median age. Mm-hmm. It's 53. So in Yavapai County, the natural change, the state says, is negative. That means more deaths than births overall. So net migration would have to be over 85 to make up for that each year. And also that current persons per unit, that's probably going to fall. It's been falling. As households age, that's probably going to continue to fall. So the needed number of units per person will rise. By how much? We don't know. We can only make assumptions. But so do we have the capacity for that in our land? So this map shows the public land ownership in and around Cottonwood. Cottonwood city limits are the solid black line. A lot of it is national forest and a lot of it is state land. So you can see that right now within the city limits of Cottonwood, 55% of it is national forest land. And that has a lot to do with annexations going across forest land to get to places that they desired to annex at the time, both to the south and to the east and the northeast. So we ended up with a lot of national forest land in the city boundary. We ended up with a couple of swaths of state land too. That's in the blue, that's state trust land. State trust land is not open space. State trust land is there for future development. It benefits the beneficiaries of state trust land, which is usually schools. So state land department manages that and sells that off for development every so often through a bidding process. So there is that state land, but again, very little of the city is available for development. That would be the red area here. So private vacant, undeveloped, 13.6, and the state trust land, that adds up to about 19%. So about 19% of the city's overall land area is available for development. Let's look a little bit more at that same slice of the pie, that 19% there. How is that distributed? The yellow on this map is vacant residential. Those are lots that, that can be developed residentially. It's zoned residentially. The pink is vacant commercial and industrial land. Those are vacant lands that could be, again, are zoned for commercial and industrial uses already. The agricultural, that is land that is, according to the county assessor, called agricultural in use, and mainly that's for grazing. So some of the large ranch lands that got annexed into the city, that's what the agricultural land is for. That is not necessarily going to remain agricultural. That could very well be opened up to development. In fact, some of those are either zoned residential or zoned planned area development. And again, the state trust land is shown in the blue. The thing about this map you might notice is that green line. That green line is the current area that's served by the sewer. So if you're developing outside that green line, it's an extra major expense to either extend sewer or to come up with a sewer system of your own. So none of that state land is within that green line, and some of that agricultural is within the green line, and some of it is not. Some of it, again, outside the green line, no sewer, very expensive to develop. So development unit capacity. Right now, we have about 800 units that are approved. As we speak, they have approval and are either under construction or are pending completion. And I passed out a list of the pending projects and what their status is. Some of them are under construction. Some of them are under construction on an individual single-family house by single-family house basis. And some of them have had approvals of the building permits, or they've applied for building permits, just haven't gone that far in the process. But total, we've got about 800 units that are approved and could be developed. We also counted about 1,100 infill lots, or potential for 1,100 units on lots that are infill, mostly within that green line. So just all these are within that green line. You could have a potential of 3,200 residents. And that's assuming a very low persons per household of 1.7. Remember, it's 2 persons and dropping. So even if over the average of the future period, it goes to 1.7 persons in the average, there's still capacity to house 3,252. And remember, that projection projected 2,500 by 2050. So we would have capacity if the city does a good job of allowing infill development on the residential that's already there. In addition to that, some of that agricultural land is within the green line, some of it is not. But there is, assuming certain densities on those agricultural lands, if they get developed residentially, there's potential for about 3,000 units there. The state trust land, potential for another 4,000. So adding that together, that's another 11,000 people, bringing the total within that 19% slice of the pie to a maximum capacity of 15,000. Now, obviously, that is a maximum. If every single potential lot is developed to its zoning potential or to the assumed zoning potential for this, that's what the picture could be. But again, the state projections are only for 2,500 people until 2050, so there is plenty of room within the undeveloped area. So, do we have the water service for that? This is the water service boundary. You saw the sewer service boundary. This is a little larger because back in 2005, our water utility purchased a number of smaller water utilities, including Verde Village, Verde Santa Fe, Quail Canyon, and we also have facilities up in the Spring Creek Ranch area up in the far northeast corner. The city has obtained a designation of adequate water supply for 6,000 acre feet, and this is all well water. City water is completely dependent on well water, but we do have a designation of adequate water supply for 6,000 acre feet of water per year from DWR, Department of Water Resources. To do that, the city had to demonstrate to DWR that the amount will be continuously, legally, and physically available to meet the needs of its customers for at least 100 years without causing groundwater table to decline below a statutorily defined depth. So 6,000 acre feet a year, what have we been pumping so far? Well, over the last 18 years or so, we've been at a little below 3,000 acre feet. That's how much has been pumped total each year. So there is quite a bit of capacity within that adequate water supply designation. So residential building permits. This is how we've been doing over the last several years here. Starting in 2011, which was kind of the bottom of the recession, we had very few permits, but remember that 43 per year number that we estimated might be a threshold for meeting that state requirement or that state projection. That would be about the 43. So we've been exceeding that every year. It's been about 43 single-family units per year so far, ever since about 2014, 15, things picked up again. That's the area in the gold color. In the dark brown, which is 5 or more units, this is apartment complexes, new apartment complexes that have come online. Those numbers look pretty impressive on the bar graph until you realize that those represent exactly 3 projects. There have been a few small projects here and there, but basically there have been 3 projects. Highland Square, which is senior housing on Mingus Avenue that was built 2015. Inspiration, which is under construction but hasn't hit the market yet. And 6th Street Lofts, which is a project that we've issued permits for but has not gone forward yet. So of those 3 projects, 2 of them haven't been built yet. We've only seen the Highland Square project. Other than that, there's been almost no activity as far as building 5 or more units, multifamily projects. Most of it's all been going to the single family and to single family manufactured. So this is how the housing types are distributed across the city. Existing as far as what's there now is single family detached is about 50% of our housing stock, our housing units. And multifamily is about 12.4%, and senior multifamily is about 9.3%. So the senior project, the Highland Square, that would have gone in the pink section here, not in the brown section. In the last 12 years or so, we've added almost nothing, again, to that multifamily over 12 units as far as actually being built on the ground. In the general plan, it has land use designations. And again, the general plan is not legislation, it's not zoning, it is a plan for the future. It guides future zoning, it guides future development. So the land use designations are there to guide zoning, and that's why every time a zoning action comes before you, we tell you whether or not it conforms with the general plan land use designation. And when it doesn't, as it did in the case of the Verde Plaza Apartments, then a land use zone change, a land use designation change is required along with the zone change. Usually they're very minor. A major land use designation change requires a very lengthy process, but major changes are generally projects that are very large, like over 100 acres, things like that. So this clears the way for zoning. Again, zoning has to follow the land use plan. And the zoning on these, it's a little hard to see at this scale. You can see it a lot better in the city atlas, but the red area is generally commercial. In the land use plan, which is map 1-6, general commercial is the red. And in the zoning district, that is split between C1, which is light commercial, and C2, which is a heavier commercial. The general plan doesn't make that distinction. It just says general commercial without really giving much guidance beyond that. So that might be something we look at during this process is, are there different types of commercial development that are correct, appropriate for certain areas, and another type that's appropriate for other areas. And this is zooming a little bit in on the existing commercial and industrial zones and the uses. We tried to plot the existing general types of businesses that exist in the commercial zones. In this map, you see the darker orange is C2, the lighter orange is C1, the light commercial. That goes up through Old Town and along Main Street down to Cottonwood and even down towards Camino Real. But on this map, automotive-oriented uses, sales, service, car washes, that sort of thing, that are very much geared toward the automobile use, those tend to locate around the highways. The 89A bypass and 260. And also we've noted places where there's drive-through uses, drive-through restaurants, drive-through pharmacies, banks. We've noted that as well. And those also tend to locate in the heavier commercial zone where the more automobile-oriented uses tend to live. The purple dots and squares, those are more industrial areas and uses, and those are located, appropriately enough, in the industrial zones, which show up in pink here. So taxable sales activity in Cottonwood. This is kind of an interesting statistic here. You can see that retail really dominates the taxable sales in Cottonwood. You see little slivers for hotels, restaurants, bars, but retail is a big deal. Our principal employers are the medical center. Again, and the activity there is not included in the taxable sales, but you see the retailers and the government and healthcare providers dominate the major employers in the city. And also employment projections. These are from the State Office of Economic Opportunity, and they project a higher growth for professional and business services here, natural resources and mining, and for some reason information in government is on a negative growth trend there. That's okay, I'll be retired by then. Employment by industry. This is, again, the U.S. Census Bureau, which puts together these statistical estimates. And you see the margin of error is pretty large when it comes to Cottonwood. This is combining Cottonwood in the orange with the state of Arizona in the blue. So it's very much in line with the state in a lot of ways. Finance and real estate is about half the state's rate. And arts, entertainment accommodations and food. So restaurants, hotels, very, very dominant here. And this is Cottonwood residents. This isn't the jobs within Cottonwood. This is where the residents of Cottonwood work. And that's an important distinction because of commuting. This I found very interesting from the Census Bureau. They estimated that 80% of the jobs in Cottonwood, in the city of Cottonwood, are held by non-residents commuting into Cottonwood. Only 20% of the jobs are held in Cottonwood are held by Cottonwood residents. And conversely, 79% of the employed residents, and this is what you saw on that chart before, commute out to jobs outside Cottonwood. Where do they go? Well, people commuting in, not a surprise, that's the dark green line there, that's Verde Village, obviously right next to Cottonwood with a population even larger than Cottonwood. No surprise to see people from Verde Village, but a little from Camp Verde, even from Prescott Valley, and from Phoenix commuting up here. In the light green, where are people in town commuting to? Well, Sedona, but also Phoenix. Phoenix, according to this estimate, has a higher number of people commuting outside from Cottonwood to Phoenix. Now, I say if this is accurate because this also has a big number left over for all other locations. So I wouldn't take this as an absolute count. Again, this is a statistical estimate, but it is interesting and it does point out our role within the region of the state. And one of the reasons people commute so much would be housing availability and cost. So we look at, this is the Zillow home value average, which seems to be a pretty good indicator of what a market is at the current time. And this changes all the time. It's continually updated. This was as of last month. But looking at all the jurisdictions in north central Arizona, Cottonwood actually comes in fairly low. Now, 387 is not what you'd call affordable for a lot of people, but comparatively, with Flagstaff and Sedona and Prescott, that could drive some of the commuting issues. Gross median rent. This is a Census Bureau estimate over the last 5 years between 2017 and 2021. So it's probably going to be on the low side. But again, Cottonwood, when compared with the housing costs of some of these other communities, comes in towards the low end. So the affordable numbers people are discussing affordable housing, workforce housing, that sort of thing. So here's the numbers right now. Affordable to people with an area median income, average income in 80% of the average median income, which would be called low income. Affordable to them, 30% of their income, that would be about $789 a month for rent. And again, even comparing with this fairly low number, I think, of the $934 for Cottonwood, gives you an indication. Look at workforce housing, people making 120% of the area median income. It would have to be below 1183, and 150% would be about 1400. So these are the numbers that would be considered affordable to these particular levels. So those are just some of the highlights of the current conditions in the city atlas. Again, there's places you can get it. This is a draft right now. If there are things that people think ought to be added, changed, errors, which are certainly possible, this will be updated continually, so let us know. And so the general plan, again, just to reiterate what the purpose of the general plan is it's a statement of community goals and development policies. Maps, diagrams, objectives, principles, standards, and plan proposals. In the general plan that's in effect right now, Chapter 2 is the vision and values. The vision and values is what sets the tone for the whole book. The rest of the elements go back to the statement, the purposes here in the vision and values for reference. In this particular chapter, Chapter 2, it includes a lot of good stuff and a lot of stuff. It has a purpose statement. It has a mission statement. It has a vision statement. It has a list of core values. It has a list of guiding principles. It has vision foundation, which gets into a lot of detail. And it has some key topics that were brought up during the visioning process. Like I said, it's a lot of good stuff, but it's a lot of stuff, and it might be something that we can, where it overlaps with things that are more specific to particular elements, that can be moved into those elements and really focus on the big picture vision and values of the city. So going over the meetings here, again, this is the overall vision, high level, high altitude, big picture discussion. And also there are some places where we might get into more specifics that can be discussed later at one of these later visioning meetings that are a little more focused. So March 9th and 11th, that's where we would lump together discussion about commercial development, residential development, housing, and economic development. We'll talk a lot about those population issues, talk a lot about the availability of housing and land for the housing. March 16th and 18th, talking about water resources and the water and wastewater services, also recreation, library services, environment, river and open space. These all kind of go together because recreation, open space, and environment make sense, as well as water resources. That's an important environmental resource as well. And also talking about city services, what could be improved for city services. March 30th and April 1st, the third series of meetings, talking more about transportation, streets and highways, bicycling, trails, transit, traffic, safety. Police will be there, so we can talk a lot about traffic issues. The general, or the Atlas also has some information on traffic safety as well, and also drainage and flooding. So that kind of gives you an idea, hopefully, of how the discussion can be ascertained over the next month or so. So from the general plan that's existing right now, these are the key topics that were there, and I thought this would be a good list to go down and have some conversation starters here. And if not to discuss tonight, maybe just think about for those future meetings later on. And certainly commissioners are welcome to attend those as well, but we did want to get the commission a chance as a body to discuss these as well. And the audience that will certainly show up on Saturday. I'm sure they're all waiting for Saturday to attend this one. But so some of the things that we're looking at here is quality of life. That was one of the issues that was a key topic from the last time around. And a lot of that had to do with small town feeling and kind of grasping the idea, what is a small town feeling? What does that mean to you? Does that mean keep it small no matter what, or does that mean just keep the characteristics? What does that mean? Also, economy, what kind of jobs people want to try and go for here. Recreation, what's important? What are people's priorities for recreation? Environment and water. What are the resources that are most important to people? Transportation and connectivity, what can be improved? What what problems do we have? What do we struggle with day to day in terms of transportation, if anything? There may not be anything, but it seems like everybody's got something, one particular intersection or section of street that we say, maybe we can do better on that one. Old Town, what are the characteristics that make Old Town special? We value Old Town, but why? What specifically is it that makes that something that we want to preserve, and by extension, those characteristics that we want to preserve? Development and growth, do we want to go with a higher population projection? Do we want to think out to 2040? Do we want to think out to 2050, or is 2035 fine? Human services, what services are being used? What are needed? In the general plan, talked a lot about senior services, talked a lot about youth services, homelessness services as well. History, how is it important to celebrate our past? How do we do it? How could we do it better? Safety and crime issues, drug prevention, what are the problems that are still there? What are some possible solutions that we can look at for the vision here and to be extended into the policies in the general plan? And something I think is new since the general plan last time is, you see it on the bottom of all our slides and all our letterhead logos, is inspiring a vibrant community. What does vibrant mean to people? People might have different definitions of it. I looked it up in the online on the thesaurus, and there's lots of synonyms for vibrant. Abuzz, alive, brisk, bustling, busy, flourishing, happening, lively. Words that are related, crowded, overflowing, swarming, teeming. Is what aspects of vibrancy do we really want to embrace here? So with that, we can leave it on this slide and maybe have a discussion, maybe open it to the public to see what the idea is, what their ideas are on this. But again, this is an opportunity for the commission as a body to kind of toss it around a little bit. We will take notes. I've got a notepad over here that I'll scribble things down on, so we make sure that I've got it down correctly, and then we can take that away and start listing all these things that are being visioned. And at the end of this month or so, kind of put them all together and see what themes emerge. I don't want to give anybody from the public the impression that whatever they put on, whatever I write on my pad is going to be shown up verbatim in the plan. It's probably going to go through the process and be generalized quite a bit, particularly in the visioning sections, but also as we go forward to write the individual chapters. So with that, I will pull my board around here and start discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Davis. I would like to invite the attendees from the public, if you'd like to speak to the general plan update presentation, now would be the time for that. Did you fill out one of our little forms? Can someone get the gentleman a little form? And you can come forward, sir, and introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Steve Slay. I live here in Cottonwood. Actually, I live in Bridgeport, so it's not quite Cottonwood. But my big concern is Old Town. And Old Town is great, it's growing, it's got the historical. But I see a lot of people, there's a big, massive parking problem, okay? People come to town, they can't find any place, they just keep going and they go up to Jerome. I think the local merchants are not benefiting from this, and I think a major plan, I know there's not a lot of room down there, but if anything to help the parking, help the tourists come in, and bring the revenue into the city, That's my concern for Cottonwood. And also, keep Cottonwood historical. There's brand-new buildings going in that look like new buildings, okay? I think the Building Architectural Committee should be something that matches the age of Cottonwood. You know, from the 20s, 30s, 1800s, actually, 1900s, on forward, not these brand-new square buildings that are starting to populate through Old Town. And that's my concern in the Old Town area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to come forward? Thank you. All right, since that's everybody who's attending this meeting, I'm closing the floor to the public and bringing the discussion to the commission. I'm going to start, as usual, with our newest member. George, your thoughts?
Madam Chairman, thank you.
We always go in order. That's why Commissioner Nelson keeps thinking it's him, because it used to be him. You're looking at me, too. I know. Well, I'm trying to kind of look at everyone.
Usually it means you got to fix the coffee and bring the cookies. Are we, the process for this, I was just curious before I get into any of that stuff. Are we the steering committee for this process?
Yes.
Or is there a separate committee?
No, this is it. We thought
Okay,
about
good.
setting up the steering committee,
Yeah.
and we've recently had a lot of trouble keeping people on committees,
Yeah.
including this one.
Yeah.
But we figured we've already, what we need is a group of citizens who are knowledgeable, who are interested in planning issues, and we said, we've already got that. It's here.
Are we, are there special studies envisioned as part of this process? Traffic study, housing study, anything like that for background?
There was a housing study done a couple years ago. That's online. It's referenced in the Atlas, and that has a lot of good information. I've updated a few of the statistics out of there, but that will help quite a bit. Don't have any studies per se, but in the Atlas we do have. I did go through the ADOT and NACOG counts, and we've got all the traffic counts in there. I noticed the other day that they just updated those for 2022, so that'll be in the next update of the draft of the Atlas. But those are in there as well. I also did a study of the crashes, injury crashes over the last 5.5 years or so, and that's in section 10, I believe, that plots all the crashes and the rates of crashes on particular stretches of road. And we'll go into that quite a bit on one of those, I think the last of the meetings here. We'll just walk through that. And another thing I want to mention about those meetings too is we will have city staff attending those. We'll have people from the police department and transportation, engineering attending those to have a back and forth. If people have questions about the way things are, they can bring that up. We'll have Tom Whitmer, the utilities director, at the meeting on the 16th to talk all about water resources. So hopefully there'll be a lot of really good back and forth. It'll be an educational process as well as us learning from people.
Good deal. I wasn't aware of the dates before. We're probably supposed to attend those, huh?
As the commission, you don't need to attend all of them.
You have to publish an agenda if we all show up?
It's not a.
Or should we not all show up?
Well, that's a good point. If more than 4 of you or 4 or more of you are going to show up, it would have to be advertised as a meeting. So it might be something we want to. If there's a lot of interest in attending those meetings among the commission, maybe it's something that staff can help you coordinate and make sure that no more than 4. So if you're interested in attending those, let us know. That's a good point.
By the way, I forgot to mention when I introduced myself that Gary was part of the planning staff that gave me my first planning job in 1989. So he's older than he looks.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, you didn't
Slip
mention
that in there.
You didn't mention Yavapai County.
No, I didn't. I cut right to the chase. I forgot all about that episode. No, 8 years. 8 years, wow.
Yeah. 1989.
Commissioner Nelson, thoughts and questions?
One thing that I've been here about 18 months now, one thing that is definitely a concern of mine, and I'm sure the public in general, is traffic enforcement, speeding enforcement. I've had some conversations with our local traffic professionals, and one of the things they bring as a concern is that oftentimes they're not able to, and I don't mean to speak for them out of tone, but they're saying that a lot of times they can't enforce traffic laws or speed limit signs or speed limits because there's no signage on the circulation elements that they are supposed to enforce. So I know it's a budget thing. I'm sure it's a council thing where you're going to do public improvements by putting in speed limit signs, enforcement tools, if you will. But I think that needs to get some attention from the city services in terms of if obviously if you can't enforce without a speed limit sign or a posting of some kind, I think some attention needs to be placed in that direction. Many people that I've spoken to in my short time here have the same concerns, is that they, especially in the mornings, the commuting hours where they're going and coming, a lot of speeding is going on, which of course is a safety concern. I'm interested in your crash data as a reactive component, but I think more needs to be done in a proactive component to get some safer circulation elements. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, when you look at the crash data, it's injury crashes. I've not included the fender benders. It's just where there's been an injury ranging from fatality down to minor boo-boo, treated at the scene, refused transport to the hospital, that sort of thing.
Right, okay. And I know we share our circulation elements with county, state elements too, and I'm not sure, I'd like to hear from our police officials how they coordinate that kind of enforcement element in terms of if it's not, if they can't write a ticket, if they can't use their power to enforce traffic safety, how can we, I guess, get a better understanding or a collective bargaining with the other agencies?
Commissioner Stevens? You're used to it.
My thoughts are all over the place right now. I think about the community development aspect, the historic preservation, and then the urbanism. We're slowly getting there with Old Town, which is pretty cool. I see some of the older buildings down there with, I think they put Airbnbs or apartments on top of a couple of the businesses. I'm not sure what that is, but I think that contributes to some of the transportation, getting Old Town being vibrant, the historic preservation, and then we're getting we passed the bungalows in that one area, so I am excited. Charleston, South Carolina has a lot of that type of thing in the urbanism, and it helps with traffic, and there's a lot of walking, which helps with all sorts of things. That's all I got.
All right. Commissioner Glasscott?
Maybe you'll touch on this during environment and water, but a lot of times we've had these meetings and there's been an issue with flooding and not cleaning those basins, or that the basins, someone's supposed to check them, but they're not being checked, correct? If I recall.
We can't say yes or no. We can't say what people are doing if we don't have that information. It's just speculation, but it is a topic we can put on there for sure.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Kling?
These meetings coming up, in the event that we could not attend, I mean, I would like to be there for the housing one for sure, and probably the water as well, but on a Saturday. Will they be recorded such as this, so that if we cannot be there physically, we can at least absorb the discussion? Is that
They will not be televised. They'll be, we'll take notes. I don't know that we'll have verbatim recording. It's going to be a much more informal, conversational process.
Sure, okay. And I so appreciate you putting all this together. I mean, it's it's so helpful, especially professionally, but regarding the water, you mentioned what we have the capacity for, and that was measured, what, in '06? Did I catch that? That we had applied for a 100-year water supply, right?
That was '09.
Or 9.
They did the
excuse me.
study for that, yes.
So then, with our projected growth, let's say we were to meet that at capacity, we would be pretty close if we doubled, right? To, if we actually came to fruition and approved all that, I mean, we would be at that line.
I would have to defer to Tom Whitmer, who's going to be here on the 16th, to talk about how he would expect that to play out. You've seen the breadth and depth of my knowledge on water issues on the slides I just gave. We've been pumping 3,000, and we have the ability legally and apparently physically to pump 6,000.
I promise I won't talk out of turn again. I just wanted to quickly ask a question about that one water slide where we are under 3,000. I noticed that, I think back about 15 years ago, the water use was higher. I was wondering what mitigation factor occurred that brought, it was like the graph looked like this, that brought the
Rates.
water just under? Was it just rain?
Rates,
Oh, rates.
rates.
Okay.
Cost.
I didn't live here then, so I didn't know.
That was private versus public owned.
Got it. All right, Vice Chair, questions, comments?
Yeah, quite a few. This will be the third time I've gotten to participate in general plan. Matter of fact, it was kind of fun going back through the pictures. I could see myself at the tables and the boards on the last pictures. And it was a really interesting, you were there too.
Do you guys
Well,
want more
both
pictures
times.
taken?
That I really appreciate that you've done this time. I think this is a huge step of splitting up the not splitting the baby, as she said, but we're splitting the baby. I think this is great because the general plan really should have to do more with what's there, and this is really kind of laying out the rest of it. And it'll be a great tool for economic development and for people that want to bring housing into the area. I think one of the So it almost feels like these general plan updates are worthless because there's a lot of time and attention that goes into revising a document. But at the end of the day, Cottonwood tends to be more reactionary than visionary when it comes to how things develop. And that's just the way it is. If you look back at your slides, the Cottonwood city limits section of the area is such a small portion of the total area that actually impacts our city. We're the commercial center for the Upper Verde. So, everybody's coming in here and doing their business. It doesn't leave much else for us to do. It doesn't allow us to change how we want to be because the impact is so great from the outside. I think we really need to pay attention, as one of the commissioners brought up earlier, about our traffic and our corridors for our traffic. As you stated in the slide, 80% of the people in this town leave town and 80% come into town, and you don't have to be very far from Mingus Avenue or Main Street in Old Town or 89A or Bridgeport or the Walmart area to understand that we have a huge impact when it comes to how traffic moves in and out of the city, especially during the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour when people are leaving and they're coming back. And I think that we probably need to pay more attention to those flows of traffic when it comes to how we zone and allow development of those areas that are so tied to those corridors, because anything we do in those areas is just going to over impact what is already happening, and that won't be good because they're already at a breaking point as they are. So I think, and I don't know how we do that with zoning. I know we talk about when a project comes forward, we talk about how that project will impact typically just the neighborhood. but they'll also have a much broader impact on the corridors that surround our city as well. The parking problem in Old Town was brought up. We're beyond having a parking problem, and Maynard hasn't even opened yet. He's gonna bring 200 cars a day down there. We don't have the space for it. The city council, I know, has talked about, a parking structure. They've talked about different types of plans to, deal with the issues down there, but nothing that happens down there is gonna be easy or cheap. And it's gonna take a long time, and it seems like all we keep doing is just kicking that can down the road, and we already have a fairly severe problem. I think we've got a neat little community, but unfortunately, I think there's not a lot we can do to change our path because the impact coming in from outside of us is so strong. So I think it means that we have to be really specific in how we want this city to grow or change or modify. And so, like the project that was brought before us tonight, and has been, several projects have been brought before us for the last couple of meetings on infill and modifications of areas that were developed and are being taken down and redeveloped. I think that's awesome if we could promote that versus all this new construction. And I think this commission and the city has been very strong on supporting those types of projects. So hopefully we will continue to do that. And I'm going to go to George's recommendation that we should have just made the sidewalk on 7th Street a condition of development there. I think it was Commissioner Kling brought up when the B of A building was being sold and they were asking for a ATM to be built out at that front corner. She brought up the idea that we should make them put a sidewalk down Cottonwood Street, and we didn't do that. And every time I drive by that intersection, I look over at that piece of dirt and I think, and that's the only section of land on that street that doesn't have a sidewalk, and we allowed them to make that modification and sell that building without requiring them to upgrade the area as it was built. And so I'm going to try to be much more mindful in the future of doing that, and tonight was one of those points of time where we could have stepped up and really held the developers' feet a little more to the fire. I know we want housing, and we want low-income housing or affordable housing as much as absolutely possible, but I think we bent over backwards when it comes to giving away the farm to the developers when they ask for things. The cottages, or whatever you want to call that project down in Old Town, across from Divine Vineyards tasting room, I think we should have pushed those houses back off that sidewalk. I think that's going to be a problem. I think the sidewalks that are going around this project, to George's comments, I think there could have been more done to make those more appealing and also create more of a open space atmosphere out in front, because all their open space is all pushed to the back of the property where it isn't doing the public any good. So I think we just can start raising our standards a little bit and expecting that the projects that come in are actually appealing to the neighborhood as well as their pocketbook. So that's about all I have.
All right, that means it's my turn. The nice thing about going last is that I can just react to everyone else. So the first thing I want to address is actually the parking issue in Old Town. So I agree with some of my fellow commissioners that this is a huge issue. You can give me another little check. But unlike some of my fellow commissioners, I don't necessarily think the solution is to figure out how to slam more parking. When people talk about preserving the historic nature of the neighborhood, typically historic neighborhoods aren't packed with SUVs and trucks, which is what will happen if we add more parking. people will park there. And that's great. We want traffic, but we don't necessarily want the parking to be right there. I'm looking at some of our neighboring communities like Sedona, and I'm wondering if maybe we can't create a cooperative plan between the public transportation, and solve some of our parking issues that way. One of the things that I know that the city has been trying to do for some time is create a more walkable city. And Old Town's a huge part of that. Right now, thanks to some new mixed-use developments that Commissioner Stevens mentioned, like the Airbnbs or apartments up at the top and the stores below, that part of town is becoming increasingly walkable. And I think that we can continue to emphasize that by actually just not adding any more parking there. Instead, come up with a way to shuttle people, especially tourists, people who don't live here, into the area. And I look at like Sedona has a trolley. Here's the thing, tourists don't want to ride the bus, but the difference between a bus and a trolley is open air versus windows. It's literally the same vehicle. If you look at the Sedona trolley, and I've lived in towns that had a trolley, and it is actually a source of revenue for the city. People find it quaint. People are willing to pay for it. I realize this is kind of pie in the sky stuff, but I think if you looked at how you could combine public transport, that could help solve the parking issue downtown. In terms of the traffic, I agree with Commissioner Garrison. We have some pretty intense veins, especially out in the Walmart area, headed down to Camp Verde and like Prescott and Phoenix. Lately, I make that commute sometimes. And it gets a little intense, especially, I know this is a coordination with ADOT thing, but I know that you have the traffic data too, but there's a lot of accidents between Walmart and sort of where the highway really opens up. And I'm wondering if there's any way for the city to coordinate to widen that part of the road. In general, I like less traffic, less wide roads, but that is one area where there's already all this impact. And then in addition to that, regarding the traffic, I think that this is hard for me to explain. It's just sort of a vague idea, but I'm going to try to express it. It would be great if we could sort of have some streets be more quaint. I don't use, you guys have some stylized street signs that you use for Old Town. I think if we expanded that to other parts of the city, it's a very small thing, but it's a signal. It's like semiotics. People will take in the signals that they see and they're like, oh, I live in a quaint neighborhood. And if we do little things like this, it will help. Regarding Commissioner George, I really struggle with your last name, and I promise I'm going to get it. Gaylord? Gaylord. Okay. Commissioner Gaylord, I think that the sidewalks are an issue. Now, I do not regret my vote on the recent proposal that we saw in the earlier meeting. I think that given the stipulations of that proposal, it was appropriate. However, I think that sidewalks are a key thing, especially sidewalks that have trees on the exterior. I know people are concerned about water. Not all trees are water hogs, and ultimately, trees actually help make an area less dry because you have the increased shade, there's less reflection of heat off of the roads and the concrete. It's extremely effective. And again, that also goes back into that historical character. Now, I've seen old photos and not all of these streets were tree lined, but there's historical accuracy and historical character. And I think that it's fair for us to sort of take the good parts that are accurate and then improve them with appropriate character. And I think trees are an appropriate character. I love this thing. Thank you for this. I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anything, like any questions. So your circulation stuff that we're supposed to take with a grain of salt. The people that are commuting in, is there any data about what kinds of jobs they're commuting in? Okay. That was my only question. Yes.
One more thing, if I could.
Yes.
And it it talks about traffic in Old Town is, if I travel up and down Cactus 3 or 4 times a day, and it's just beyond terrible. I think there's gonna, terrible in safety. We're reaching a point down there where we're really gonna have to start seriously considering one-way streets. And I hate saying that because people will come out of the woods and shoot me for that, but Cactus is one of those streets that really probably should be looked at as making it a one-way, because we have so much parking happening on that street because of overflow from Main Street, but also from the residential areas that have taken over their yards and don't park in their own property anymore. They park on the street, as well as the hotels. And then once Maynard opens up, he's gonna clog that corner up at Pima and Main, or Pima and Cactus, and it's just gonna get even worse than it is now. If we made that a one-way, possibly going north, at least we would have a little more safety when it comes to how people are parking both sides of a small, narrow road and trying to go 2 different directions. It's constantly that I have to pull into an open space near the curb so somebody can come down the other side. We got a couple residents that park in the middle of the road to run into their house. There was a truck today that couldn't even get up Cactus because there were so many cars parked in the way that he couldn't make the curves. So it's just becoming problematic, and we don't really have many in this town, but I think to the point of making the streets more quaint or more
Safe.
calming. You know, you guys did a great job on 12th Street when 12th was rebuilt there around Birch. You added that island in the middle of the street.
There's a picture there.
And that was done as a way to help calm the traffic coming up to the kids' park there in the fairgrounds, and I think it's done a great job. It looks nice. I don't know if it really slows anybody down. They tend to weave around it pretty good, but it does create a calming effect for the road, having an obstacle in the way. I thought for sure you'd never get anything to grow on it because people would be running over it, and stuff seems to be doing fine. So I really like the idea that we start adding some curves. I know that was a real big thing on Tim Costello's list, was to try and put as many curves into the roads as possible so that it would create a slowing effect. So I think we could really start doing some things with some of our larger roads that shouldn't be as large or as busy as they are, as well as what I said before about really starting to pay a little more attention on those really high use areas. And it was so funny that you pulled open that page and it was exactly the spaces I was talking about that are problematic. We're just completely surrounded by traffic problems right now. So anyway, that was all.
I wanted to add also, because you just made me think of it, I know that street signs are a work in progress. Has the city thought about I don't know how this fits legally, I'm not an officer. Has the city thought about painting the miles per hour, like the legal speed limit on the road itself at key points?
Not that I know of.
Because it seems like that would be cheaper and faster, but might help.
It is a maintenance issue long-term, but it's, any of these ideas are things that can be thrown in.
Just that's like really random.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, since there's a lot of discussion on what makes streets interesting and safe, or too fast, or too congested, there are a lot of links down at the bottom of each page. I've got resources that link to different publications, and some of them are just kind of reference, like the ADOT counts and things like that, but some of them are really interesting new books on traffic, on streets, what makes a street interesting and productive economically. So I would encourage you to follow some of those links. There's one that's really good on walkability by Jeff Speck, called Walkable Cities rules. That's got a lot of really interesting stuff in there. But yeah, I tried to put in some resources that can kind of spur discussion and say, hey, maybe we could do that, or
Yeah.
no, I don't like that.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing those out. I actually heard of walkable city rules. I haven't gotten around to it. In that regard, there's something I've wanted to bring up for a long time, and this might be the time for it. I think that Cottonwood's guidelines to always fence in multifamily developments are sometimes making the city less walkable. Now, obviously, it's development dependent. Like, some developments are better suited being fenced. However, I think that there are places, I had a citizen complain to me that, so she lives in the, immediately adjacent to where they're building the new apartments across from the medical center. And they're building a big wall there. And she had not realized that how much that wall was going to break up her experience of the street. I think when at first she was in favor of the apartments, but now she's much less so, partly because she doesn't like the construction noise, which will go away. But a big part of it's just the way it breaks up the street. And there's been a couple of projects we've had where I haven't felt it was necessarily appropriate or needed, but I wanted to bring this up. Like, I feel like that is kind of an old-fashioned idea of always fencing in multifamily developments. It's like we're trying to protect single-family homes from apartments, which is exactly the opposite of the spirit of the plans that the city staff have prevented about having this. I interpret vibrant, to answer an earlier question, as a community that's very interconnected, where it's nodal, like neurons in a brain or a network of computers. This is the stuff I deal with. So that's how I think of vibrancy. And I think of, people going from one small node to another, to go shopping, to go to their house, and like experiencing the city. And not, the worst kinds of cities are suburbs where there's like walled garden after walled garden after walled garden. Those are insular, sort of depressing communities where you end up, no matter how nice and wide your sidewalk is and how many trees there are on it, you're always walking next to a 6-foot block wall. And I don't want that for Cottonwood. I want there to be like all of that. I don't know how you write that down.
Can I add something
Yes.
to what she was saying about parking? Instead of going out to Sedona, which seems to me very far to commute to here, utilizing space we already have. I go to Safeway all the time. They have plenty of parking in that parking lot that you could maybe coordinate with Safeway to get some parking there and then shuttle them from Safeway to Old Town. Because then Safeway, when people come back to their vehicles, they'll shop in that little marketing center. And even across the street at Fry's, I mean, there's always some parking that you could actually maybe piggyback onto those locations, still supporting the local businesses and supporting Old Town as well.
That's a really good idea. I also think like for future growth, something over by the medical center out that way, there's nothing there right now, but eventually there will be stuff there. And like that stuff will probably want to sell stuff to people.
Stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what the stuff is yet.
Retail revenue.
Yes, retail revenue, tax revenue. Did anyone think of any additional questions or comments that they'd like to add?
Just to dovetail on Mr. Garrison, Commissioner Garrison said earlier about, traffic safety issues. I think there's a real room for a kind of just a study on things like that around here. I mean, with the, good Lord, the traffic volumes this town experiences for the size that it is, 12,000 people. Last I knew, that intersection by Home Depot was in excess of 75,000 cars a day, which is, more than I-17 in Camp Verde. That was years ago. I don't know what it is now. We've accommodated it by adding slip ramps. I really couldn't tell you what the volumes are now. But I mean, just little things like coming into Old Town, the crosswalk on the curve. You put it on the curve so you can see it from both directions, but then as soon as you get through that, you got the guy in the big pickup truck backing out of the diagonal parking right into your path. It's interesting.
It makes you go slow, doesn't it?
Yeah, I feel like there ought to be something in advance of the crosswalk. I mean, it's just stuff like that, you know. It's all over, all those crosswalks out on the big drag there in Midtown, that area. There's mid-block crosswalks. Are they mid-block or they just look like they are? You know, they've got a little road cone out there in the middle, and that's about it. I don't know what you do about that, but I mean, you know, we pared down that link of North Main Street to 2 lanes with bike lanes. I don't know if there's room for that out there, or if that's, you know, the traffic load is too big to narrow that one down, but those kinds of things I think are worth looking at.
Which area down?
Like from Main Street to Mingus, that section of Midtown, you know, that includes the Cherry, Aspen, Birch
Okay, yeah.
intersections. That might be a resolve for something like that.
Do you have more thoughts?
I just want to make his white sheet. Did I make it on there yet? Did any of my ideas make your white sheet?
I think so, yeah.
Commissioner Quang, did you have something?
I just wanted to add to your trolley comment. I think we have space at the ballpark lot, do we not? It's primarily vacant, to where a trolley could run from there, realistically. I mean, all the times I've been down there, it's empty. It may not be during sporting events, but I taught my daughter how to ride a bike there because it was so empty. And it's close enough to Old Town that I don't think it would be far-fetched to utilize that in some capacity that we already have. You know, tourists don't know about that. Us locals know where there's nooks and crannies we can park and walk. But the tourists do not necessarily. Yes. No, not the fairgrounds. As you go towards Riverfront,
Riverfront Park.
Yeah.
there's the ballpark lot there, and it's huge.
We
that's
used to
also
run
great.
shuttles to Riverfront for events in Old Town. It worked pretty good.
Yeah, we should just get that loop going like every weekend.
I think the chamber.
Yeah, it's a good idea, really.
To
Well-
partner, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and there might be options for, rather than a shuttle, improved pedestrian.
Yeah.
Both.
If you can park there and walk 3-4 blocks to get to Old Town.
There's already a path there.
You have to know it's there.
But you don't know about
It's
it.
difficult, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the only one that we've got, yeah, it does, it's kind of alongside of a fence and it's,
Is it lit?
Nothing in this town is lit. It's the law.
But they just opened that sidewalk along, they did a ribbon cutting for that sidewalk not too long ago.
yes, that's the Riverfront Loop Trail, runs along the south side of the park there, and that does connect
Cool
Old Town
idea.
with-
It's a cool idea.
Was it
I just-
yours?
No, no. I discovered it one day. I was out walking. I took the dog down to the park. I had no idea there was a trail going back there now.
Yep,
Maybe the answer to that, so I still like my trolley idea, but I like the walking trail too, especially because it already exists. So maybe the answer to that is increased signage
Exposure.
and exposure, but probably signage. And maybe, I know no lights are allowed, but maybe some lights that point down. I know that for people who aren't used to dark sky, which even though I've lived in Cottonwood for 5+ years now, it still includes me. And I appreciate that it's very important to many people, and I support that. I think that people feel safer sometimes with lighting.
You can have light and still be dark sky.
Yeah, just have it point down.
Or like on an airplane, in a movie theater, just along the line of the
Yeah.
walkway.
Yeah. Anybody else have cool ideas? I mean, no pressure.
I was thinking Albuquerque, we don't want to get too big like Albuquerque, but they have the trolley idea in that Old Town area too.
I've seen it in, Sedona is actually the least successful trolley I've seen. Like Albuquerque, I just said it because it's close. Albuquerque, San Luis Obispo, California, which is where I'm originally from, has a trolley that just goes in a loop. Yeah, well, obviously San Francisco, but I wouldn't mention that in these meetings. Too late. Not those kinds of trolleys, guys. It's going to be fine. But just the idea that something would be attractive to tourists, but wouldn't cost the city, not that a bus is negligible, but any more than like a bus.
I think the chamber could partner on this,
The
though.
chamber could partner on that.
You could support pedicabs down there, parking, the guy renting a pedicab.
It's all uphill and downhill.
Good exercise.
Don't worry if you don't have more ideas. This is just the
is the
start. We
beginning.
have a lot
Yeah, I
more
know.
meetings, so you don't have to think of them all tonight.
I know. I'm
Don't
thinking
worry,
more
we'll wake up in the middle of the
night.
night, yeah.
Has there been any more thought and discussion on what we're going to do with the land under the slag pile? It's melting away. They told us it would take 15 years.
15 years ago.
Yeah. Well, they had to wait till after the crash to get started. So that's about like 2010, something like that. So it is a lot smaller than it used to be. That's a good central location for something.
Yeah.
Well, as of right now,
Someday.
it's partially industrial and partially, actually, it's in the PSP, public, semi-public area too.
And it is owned by Verde Valley Fair.
Yeah, Fairgrounds owns a piece of that.
Fairgrounds.
There's a small portion that is owned by others, but the majority of it is the fair.
Is the fair going to stay there? They have any alternative locations?
Yeah, we'll send an email, actually. Oh, yeah, we'll ask.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that takes care of kind of the reactive
The reactive
comments, like you
leaving.
said. We're reacting, and this is kind of our chance to, I mean, a lot of the times we have here, we're looking at projects that are proposed and reacting to it. This is, in playing defense, this is a chance to play offense. So it's really the opportunity for the public and for the commission to really start to get creative, think about these questions, and what, in addition to the kind of specific things which can be thrown into the more specific discussions later on, kind of overriding issues with the whole plan.
Yeah, I think so this is more of an overriding thing. In terms of heading more growth in the direction of like Clarkdale, I feel like I know that a lot of that is planned area development that's just not developed, or there's a big section of it. Does the city, I'm trying to get a sense of this just from planned land use, like, does the city have any vision for that area? Is it trying to push developers that way? I keep thinking that that's the way Cottonwood should try to get developers to go, because one, Clarkdale is sort of, it is a vibrant neighbor community that's very similar to Cottonwood. So if Cottonwood starts to head towards Clarkdale, you can start sharing more resources, and there's a lot of value in that. If we become, I don't want to say a singular like a singular destination, but I know we have a distinct identity, but sharing resources is nice. The other thing is heading that way is, like, there's a Yavapai College outpost right there, sort of right on the line between Cottonwood and Clarkdale. I actually don't know where it technically falls. It's like right there.
Barely in Clarkdale.
Yeah, it's like right. And I feel like that, I know that some of the conversation around like the tax dollars of the college, that can get contentious, but ignoring that for a second, there is opportunity there, I think, locally, like to emphasize education as a part of our community. That campus is actually really beautiful, and if we could start connecting I'm sure you guys have tried to do this, start to connect some of the walking trails to the campus, and hopefully someday there will be enough students there that they start coming, like bleeding back towards Old Town and supporting our retail establishments and our businesses. Rather than just, like maybe people will come here and for the college. If the city helps to sort of encourage the use of that space. Talk to me about that. Okay, I'm done pontificating, I promise.
Well, that's what this is for.
I know. Still, though. Does anyone else have anything? This is like last call. All right.
Not last call by any means. You have
No,
that
well,
whole.
last call for the evening, not for the project.
You
Is
have,
there any intent from anybody to attend this Saturday?
That's the housing, right?
What's that?
The housing one
On
is
housing.
no, this Saturday is kind of a repeat of this one, less
Yeah.
formal.
I'm not going to this. No.
Okay. We'll send out emails before each meeting so we can get a head count, just in case we might have a quorum.
Okay.
If you guys could please
Please.
check your emails and respond.
Is there a way that you can just put out an announcement, there may possibly be a quorum on these days?
Given the frequency of these meetings, we don't want to just do it for every single one.
All right, thank you very much. I think that the commission has exhausted their ideas and questions, and your presentation was great. Thorough, the city atlas is great. So that is it for the discussion item on the agenda this evening. Now it's time for suggested topics for future meetings. I know you have one, Vice Chair.
Yeah, so I think, and the reason I was asking specifically about the Silverado project, I think it went off the rails with us, and we didn't do a good job of forwarding that to the council. And so I'm really kind of curious about how the council discussion went, and I can go back and watch the movie. It's on YouTube, and try and get my head around where they were going. But I think at the end of the day, I know with us, it got sidetracked with a problem or a concern that really wasn't part of our task. And so we didn't do our job when it came to actually looking at the PAD from a development standpoint as to the use of the land, which means we didn't send the project to the council with any usable, ammunition for their discussion at the end of the day. And I really would like to not see that happen again. And so I keep thinking back through that meeting of how that happened and why we went sideways. And I know I was part of those discussions, but I think that one just really fell through the cracks, and I think we can do a better job. And I just am trying to learn from that one so we don't have that happen again. So that's why I'm so curious about the council's decision, because I thought for sure the council would approve it, because they are very, just like we are, mindful of the need for housing. And it was at the end of the day, I think it was a great use of the space in a good location, but it needed some modifications made. I think that probably could have still allowed it to move forward. So anyway, that's my one concern. I think it would be good if we had a discussion about that specific project and how it moved through the process, so we as a group can try not to let that happen again.
I feel that our lawyer meeting tonight might help with that, too.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just wondered, it used to be practice to send a representative from P and Z to the council meeting, whether it was the chairman or the vice chair, especially when it was a recommendation for denial. So you've got somebody representing the, apart from staff, I mean,
Yeah.
somebody up from the commission who can jump in on the conversation.
So
if
I
they
had,
feel like they need to.
yes, agreed. I actually had planned on being there. The meeting was moved, and the new date I would have attended, but I had COVID.
So we still do that though.
Yes.
And they attend ours at times.
And they attend ours at times as well.
We saw them frequently.
Any other suggestions for future topics? All right. Thank you very much, commissioners. I make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're out of here.
And thank you for this.
Sure.
Yes, fantastic.